Chapter 282. I hurried back to the shop. Xie Chenghua and Lu Chuanda were still lying on the ground. Wang Kuan was checking their injuries. I hurried to them and asked Xiao Jin to go back upstairs to rest. Then, I thanked Wang Kuan and said, "Brother Wang, you've been out for a few days, and your wife's due date is almost here. You should go home first. I can handle this." Wang Kuan was a man who had experienced many hardships in society. He understood that I wanted to send him away. He didn't say anything more. After telling me to be careful, he hurried to drive away. After he left, I lowered my head to check Xie Chenghua and Lu Chuanda's injuries. Metaphysics included medicine. I had also dabbled in it, but my cultivation wasn't deep enough. I could only treat common headaches and fevers. Fortunately, after a quick check, I found that the hunchbacked old woman hadn't attacked them severely. The two of them only had some minor internal injuries. Moreover, they were a little tired, but it wasn't a big deal. Then, I realized that I was worried. No matter what, Xie Chenghua and Lu Chuanda were now my people. If they were seriously injured this time, I would have to uphold justice for them no matter what. However, I was obviously not a match for the hunchbacked old woman, and it was inevitable that there would be a rift between us. I wanted to transfer some Dao energy to them to alleviate their injuries, but I suddenly remembered that my Dao energy was still at the ceiling acupoint realm, which was inferior to theirs. So, I gave up on this thought and helped them sit down. I asked the hunchbacked old woman when she had come to our door and if she had dealt a heavy blow to them. Xie Chenghua told me. After I left that day, I went to the place where the hunchbacked old woman stayed to collect the bill. Everything was fine when I collected the bill, and he came back with the money. However, not long after he returned to the shop, the old woman stormed into the shop. She didn't give them a chance to explain and beat them up. Then, she searched the house and said that she wanted to find me. At first, Xie Chenghua thought that the old woman had changed her mind after paying the bill and wanted to come back to rob me. Now, he understood that the talisman had a problem. However, they didn't know where to find me. When the old woman was about to go crazy, Xie Chenghua was smart enough to talk to her. "Although the talisman has a problem, I didn't mean to deceive you. When I made the talisman, I found a lot of special materials. For example, the fox armpit pen. The hunchbacked old woman also knows that. If I really wanted to deceive you, how could there be so many problems? I also said that I would come back in 3 to 5 days. Then, I can check the talisman." I tried my best to persuade the hunchbacked old woman. However, the two of them still suffer a lot. From that day on, the hunchbacked old woman sat there and waited for me for 3 days. The two of them were also injured. They lay on the ground and waited for me for 3 days. Fortunately, I came back on time. Otherwise, if that old woman lost her patience, it would be hard to say what the final result would be. After listening to him, I felt less resentful toward the old woman. She had spent a lot of time and energy to get this talisman. She had waited for half a year, and when she got the talisman, she found that it couldn't be used. It was normal for her to do something impulsive when she felt that way. However, she didn't kill anyone. Instead, she waited for 3 more days. Although it was mainly because of the temptation of the Heaven Deception Talisman, it at least proved that the old lady had no evil intentions. Just as I was about to support the two of them upstairs to rest, Xie Chenghua asked me curiously, "Boss, that old fox already took you out. Why did he let you come back after reaching the door?" It wasn't easy to answer this question to him. I grinned and said, "That old woman's strength isn't bad, but I'm not a noob either." Inside the store, I was accidentally controlled by her. Outside the store, I counterattacked and broke free from her control. That old woman probably couldn't easily control me, so she agreed to my suggestion. I was only half joking, but the moment I said that, Xie Chenghua and Lu Chuanda both gasped in shock. In the end, it was Xie Chenghua who said with envy and admiration, "Boss is truly a young talent. You've just arrived at Shuyao, yet you're able to make this old fox, who's close to the celestial master realm, wary. It's really, really admirable." This time, it was my turn to be dumbfounded. What a joke. In the glory of consciousness realm, the difference in strength between every level was like heaven and earth. Not to mention the heavenly master realm. I wasn't even a match for Yi Pianpian and Zhang Qianwen. who were in the middle stage of glory of consciousness. Xie Qinghua and Lu Chuanda really believed everything. However, thinking about it, the two of them knew me at the metaphysics exchange competition. At that time, I used my pressure point realm cultivation to consecutively defeat a few Nanyang people in the glory of consciousness realm. That was probably the reason why the two of them felt that it wasn't a big deal for me to challenge those in a higher realm. I smiled awkwardly, not knowing how to explain. At that moment, Xie Qinghua took the initiative to change the topic. He asked me if I needed them to prepare anything else since I was going to make a new talisman. In order to repair the Heavenly Deception Talisman, the main thing was to change the 35 normal yellow talismans to the same talismans made with shaman energy. Naturally, they needed the materials from last time. However, the two of them were injured and hadn't rested for 3 days. I told them that we would discuss the matter of the talismans later and told them to rest first. Both of them didn't have any serious injuries. After a night's rest, they were much better the next day. According to my instructions, they went to look for the first sunflower's blood and the death jade. After that, I spent 2 days to make all 35 talismans in one vigorous spurt. This time, when I put the whole set of talismans together, the 36 talismans seemed to automatically respond to each other. Each talisman released its own aura, and after mixing with each other, the color of the talismans changed, turning purple. I was dumbstruck as I watched from the side. No wonder this set of talismans was called purple. It turned out that it would automatically turn purple. Previously, I and the hunchbacked old woman, one was ignorant and the other didn't understand the Tao of talismans. We actually ignored such an obvious sign. After the talismans were completed, I asked Xie Qinghua to find the old woman. However, he didn't find her this time. 2 days later, she proactively appeared in my shop. This time, she didn't have the cold and arrogant aura she had before. After entering the shop, she looked around carefully before asking for the talismans. When I gave her the wooden box containing the Heavenly Deception talismans, she opened it and glanced at it. Then, she left as fast as she could. Xie and Lu, who were watching from the side, were stunned. Even I was dumbfounded. Although I knew that she was afraid of Xiaojin, she was still at the Quasi-Sky Master Realm. Who knew that she would be afraid of him to such an extent? If the Heavenly Deception talismans weren't so important to her, she wouldn't even want to show her face. No matter what, this matter was finally over. I heaved a sigh of relief. In the next few days, I didn't do anything else. I stayed in the shop and rested, wondering if I should go to Thailand or secretly go to the capital. There was no need to mention the reason why I wanted to go to Thailand. However, I wanted to go to the capital because I was worried about Yi Piampian and the fatty. Last time, I had asked Yang Kaichen to ask for information, but many days had passed, and he hadn't received any news. I understood that Shenzhen was too far from the capital. It wasn't that Yang Kaichen didn't try his best to find information. It was just that he couldn't get any information. However, according to the information Yang Kaichen had told me, the people of the Metaphysics Society didn't want to keep their mouths shut about Yi Piampian. As long as I went to the capital, I wouldn't be able to see her. However, it wouldn't be a big deal if I just wanted to ask for information about her. Coincidentally, I would pass by Kaifeng on the way, so I decided to go to Mount Huang to ask about the fatty. Although I had a grudge because he didn't tell me about the solar eclipse, I still trusted the fatty. As long as I knew their situation, I didn't have anything to worry about anymore. Next, I would go to the royal palace in Thailand to see Aladi's teacher, Saranpo. If the power of the 9 spirits he mentioned was really witchcraft energy, I would stay there for a while to increase my cultivation base. I wouldn't come back for a while. If the power of the 9 spirits wasn't witchcraft energy, I would go there to relax. Of course, it was a foreign country, and I didn't know what kind of dangers were waiting for me there. However, the path of cultivation was full of dangers. There was no way to give up eating for fear of choking. While I was making up my mind, Yang Kaichun called me. He asked me to go to his house. I had been to his house once, so I knew the address. After hanging up the phone, I hurried to his house. When we arrived, he sent his wife away. He was the only one in the house. As soon as we sat down, Yang Kaichun cheerfully told me that he had contacted Zhang Qianwen a few days ago and asked him to gather information about Yi Piampian and Lin Hu in the capital. Soon after, he got the news about Lin Hu and Yi Piampian. When I heard that, I was overjoyed. I had wanted to contact Zhang Qianwen, but after the incident in Meizhou, I couldn't get through to him. That was why I couldn't get in touch with him. Instinctively, I thought that he had gone to some secluded place to cultivate, so I didn't ask Yang Kaichun. I didn't expect that he could contact me. After asking, I learned that Yang Kaichun had gone to Meizhou 1 month ago to visit Master Zhao's grave to offer his condolences. Coincidentally, he had met Zhang Qianwen there. That was how I got in touch with him. I patted my head. Although we had killed Zhang Bingxiang during that incident, he had been in Meizhou for many years. It was hard to say if he didn't have some loyal dogs. If Master Zhao's grave was in Meizhou, Zhang Qianwen wouldn't feel at ease. Even if he had to live in seclusion, he would stay nearby to take care of him. After thinking it through, I asked Yang Kaichun about Yi Piampian and the fatty. Yang Kaichun told me that Zhang Qianwen didn't know much about Yi Piampian's situation. He just confirmed that the Metaphysics Society had imprisoned her in a cold place. I heard that people who went to that place couldn't come out again. It was also a coincidence that Zhang Qianwen met the fatty as soon as he arrived in the capital. He was on his way back to Kaifeng. Since Zhang Qianwen didn't know him, he didn't ask him. He just took a picture and sent it to me. Then, Yang Kaichun handed me his phone to show me the picture Zhang Qianwen had sent. I picked it up. It was the fatty. However, the other person next to him caught my attention. Nangong. He was also safe and sound. Moreover, he was next to the fatty. I frowned and thought for a while. During the solar eclipse, Nangong had brought Yi Piampian to the back mountain of the Metaphysics Society. His methods weren't bad. It wasn't a big deal that he could escape. After returning the phone to Yang Kaichun, I exhaled. No matter what, I had confirmed that Yi Piampian and the fatty were safe. I could relax for the time being. As for Yi Piampian being imprisoned by the Metaphysics Society, even if I wanted to, I couldn't do anything about it. I could only wait and think about it later. I left Zhang Qianwen's contact information, then bid farewell to Yang Kaichun. I returned to the Feng Shui metaphysics shop. As soon as I entered the shop, I saw Xie Changhua sitting there with a dazed face. My heart sank. Did that old woman come to cause trouble again? Before I could ask, Xie Changhua got up and hurried to me. The police have taken Lu Chuanda away. Chapter 283. What did Lu Chuanda do? How did he get involved with the police? I subconsciously asked. Xie Changhua was also puzzled. He shook his head and said, I don't know. The police came and didn't say anything. They directly handcuffed him. Before they left, they told me that they were going to bring him back to cooperate with a criminal investigation. I was also bewildered, so I didn't have time to ask for the details. When I got a hold of myself, they had already taken him away. I was a little restless as I paced back and forth. I felt sorry for Xie Changhua and Lu Chuanda because of the hunchback woman. I had made them suffer a lot. Who would have thought that another problem would arise? It had only been a few days, and now something had happened again. The most important thing now was to find out what Lu Chuanda had done. I stopped and wanted to ask Xie Changhua, did Lu Chuanda do anything strange lately? However, before I could open my mouth, I suddenly remembered two things Xie Changhua had told me when we had just returned to the city. The first was about the hunchback woman, which had been solved. The second was related to the police. Could Lu Chuanda have been implicated because of that incident? When I told Xie Changhua my thoughts, his face changed. When he opened his mouth, his voice trembled. It's a big case involving dozens of lives. If Chuanda is involved, it's going to be a big deal. He looked frightened, and I didn't look good either. This case wasn't just about dozens of lives. Although we didn't mention it, we both remembered the broken bronze mirror and the spontaneous combustion of the golden light divine talisman. At that time, I guessed that the Heavenly Master was involved in this case. Even if it wasn't the Heavenly Master, it had to be at the same level as the Heavenly Master. That was why I asked him not to mention it and not to care about it anymore. I didn't deny that I was really scared. I stood there and pondered for a long time. I comforted Xie Changhua and asked him not to worry too much. I didn't know if he was involved in this case or not. Then, I turned around and called Wang Yongjun. If it was before, we wouldn't have needed Wang Yongjun's help. Whether it was me, Xie Chenghua, or Lu Chuanda, our positions in the Metaphysics Society weren't low. The Metaphysics Society had always cooperated with the police. But now, Xie Chenghua and Lu Chuanda had been expelled from the Metaphysics Society, and I had become the Metaphysics Society's enemy. It would be hard for me to simply go to the police station to inquire about something. I smiled wryly. When I was in the Metaphysics Association, I didn't think that this identity was very useful. Now that I didn't have this identity, I started to miss it. The call went through quickly. I shook my head and put the distracting thoughts aside. I briefly told Wang Yongjun about it and asked him to help me inquire about it. Wang Yongjun's power wasn't ordinary. After a few minutes, he called back. His voice was much heavier than before. He told me that Lu Chuanda's case wasn't simple. He had asked a high-ranking member of the Shenzhen police force to ask about it. He also asked him to use his connections to take care of Lu Chuanda. However, the other side told me that Lu Chuanda was involved in a big case, and that no information was allowed to be leaked. Not to mention taking care of him, they couldn't even reveal the details of the case. After explaining the situation, Wang Yongjun asked me, "How deep is Lu Chuanda's involvement in this case? If it's not too deep, he can use his connections in the province to see if he can solve this case." At this moment, my face was completely dark. Although Wang Yongjun hadn't found a definite case, there weren't many cases in the country that could be classified as a major case by the police. Even the higher-ups of the police didn't dare to reveal the information. I was afraid that my worries would come true. I didn't know if Lu Chuanda was involved in this case or not. I didn't dare to give Wang Yongjun an answer. After thinking for a while, I told him, as long as you can ask someone to check the situation, it's fine. As for saving Lu Chuanda, it's not urgent. After hanging up, Xie Chenghua and I sat there, waiting for the news. This time, Wang Yongjun's efficiency wasn't good. I waited for a long time, but he didn't call me. I had to talk to Xie Chenghua, try to find another way to investigate this case. After chatting for a while, I thought of an idea. According to Xie Chenghua, a woman came to my shop to ask for help. That was why Lu Chuanda was involved. The police didn't want to reveal the details of the case. However, since the woman wasn't in the police station, I could ask her about the situation. After thinking it through, I quickly made up my mind. I asked Xie Chenghua to stay in the shop and wait for Wang Yongjun's call. I went out to find Yu Fuda's wife to ask about the situation. When I left the shop, I sighed. From the day I learned about this case, I had been restless. Instinctively, I didn't want to have anything to do with this case. However, I had never thought that I would be involved in this case. That day, when the woman came to my shop to ask for help, she had left her address. Moreover, it wasn't hard to find an orchard in the outskirts of the city. I took a taxi and soon arrived at the Fruit Tree Orchard in the outskirts of the city. The taxi took me directly to the entrance of the orchard. After getting out of the car, I lifted my head and saw a sign that said, Fruit Tree Plantation Limited Company. I could see that Yu Fuda's business wasn't small. He had a plantation, and he had even set up a company. Unfortunately, the gate of the orchard was sealed by the Shenzhen Public Security Bureau. The entire orchard was sealed. Yu Fuda's house was in the orchard. Since the orchard was sealed, his wife couldn't be at home. I looked around, and soon I found 3 contact numbers in the company profile at the entrance. I called them one by one. The first phone was turned off, but the second one got through. It was a woman who answered the call. I tried to ask. Fortunately, it was Yu Fuda's wife, Peng Huaiyun. Perhaps it was because of this case, Peng Huaiyun sounded vigilant. Why are you looking for her? I didn't directly tell her my purpose. Instead, I told her, I'm from the metaphysics world. I heard about this case from a friend. I think her husband is being controlled by some evil magic. I'm interested in this case, and I want to talk to her. Peng Huaiyun kept silent for a while. I thought she was reluctant, but she quickly agreed. She told me the room number of a hotel in the city. She asked me to meet her there in 1 hour. After hanging up, I called a taxi and headed straight to the city. When I arrived at the hotel, I didn't go upstairs. I waited patiently in the lobby for around 1 hour before heading upstairs. I quickly found the room number Peng Huayun had given me. However, after knocking on the door for a long time, no one answered. I was a little hesitant. When I was about to call again, a woman's voice arose behind me. "Are you Mr. Zhang Wenli?" I turned around and saw a slender woman in her 50s standing there. She wore amber-colored glasses, and her hair was pulled back into a bun on top of her head. She looked quite intellectual, like a university professor. I nodded. "I'm Zhang Wenli. Are you Peng Huayun's sister?" This case was related to the police, and it was possible that the Metaphysics Society was involved as well. Since my identity couldn't be exposed, I randomly used an alias on the phone. Peng Huayun wasn't as vigilant as she appeared on the phone. She smiled and nodded at me. Then, she opened the door and invited me in. It was a suite. I could see that Peng Huayun's financial status wasn't bad. After he sat down on the sofa, Peng Huayun poured me a cup of tea. Then, she sat across from me. Before I could say anything, she asked with a smile, "Mr. Zhang, the friend you mentioned must be Lu Chuanda, right?" I frowned. Peng Huayun smiled again. "Mr. Zhang, don't misunderstand. I've only asked Mr. Lu Chuanda for help on my husband's case. The police have been trying to cover up the news. If Mr. Zhang knows about it, you must have asked Mr. Lu Chuanda." She was so coherent that I had to nod and tell her the truth. "Yes, I am indeed Lu Chuanda's friend. This case originally had nothing to do with us, but I don't know why the police suddenly took my friend away today. They said it was because of this case. I don't know the details of the case, so I wanted to ask you about it." Peng Huayun didn't seem to be surprised that Lu Chuanda was taken away by the police. The smile on his face didn't change at all. After a moment of silence, he said to me, "Actually, I just came back from the police station. I already know about Mr. Lu's situation. Mr. Zhang, you came in such a hurry to find out about the situation because you want to save Mr. Lu, right?" I nodded. "Of course." Chapter 284. We can't save him? I frowned and thought for a long time, but I didn't understand what Peng Huayun meant. I asked her, "As far as I know, Lu Chuanda only went to the police station once because of your invitation. Besides that, he has nothing to do with this case. I can understand why he was brought to the police station for investigation. But what do you mean by you can't save him?" Peng Huayun was still sitting there. She picked up the teacup in front of her and took a sip. Then, she smiled and shook her head. "It's not that I can't save him. Just now, in the police station, a policeman told me that Lu Chuanda can't get out." "Why would the policeman say that?" "The reason the police are saying this is because something strange happened." Peng Huayun didn't wait for me to ask this time. The faint smile on his face disappeared, and a strange expression appeared on his face as he continued to speak. "This case has too many implications. For the past few days, the city and the province have been busy. It wasn't until last week that the Ministry of Public Security finally set up a special task force to head down south. The people from Beijing have arrived. Naturally, they have to reinvestigate this case, including the witnesses and evidence. There aren't any witnesses in this case, but there's a lot of evidence." "Evidence?" I was a little surprised. Then, I remembered that Lu Chuanda had told me about the dozens of severed limbs of the deceased. The evidence Peng Huayun was talking about should be these. Before I could think further, Peng Huayun continued to tell me that there were many people in the special task force from the capital. There were even a few forensic doctors. When they arrived, they immediately went to the morgue to take out the sealed evidence. They felt that something was wrong, so they called the forensic doctors who were in charge of this case to ask about the situation. When the forensic doctors from the Shenzhen police station came to take a look, they all opened their eyes wide in shock. Forensic doctors dealt with corpses all day long, so of course they had guts. However, they had never seen such a scene before. The pieces of flesh that Yufuda had killed and chopped up had somehow been pieced together in the cold storage of the police station, forming a complete corpse. One had to know that when they were storing, every piece of minced meat and every piece of corpse was packed in a bag with a serial number on it. But now, all the bags were broken and scattered to the side. The minced meat seemed to struggle out of the bag on its own and forcefully squeeze together, returning to the appearance of a corpse. This was because these pieces of flesh did not originally come from the same corpse. After they were forcibly pieced together, they looked like a doll that had been sewn together. One piece was black, one piece was white, one piece was fat, and one piece was thin. Furthermore, half of these corpses were children, so some of the large bodies had small heads on them. Some of the small bodies had fat human heads on them. It looked ridiculous and terrifying. The local forensic doctors who had performed the autopsy were all stunned, and some even fainted on the spot. Fortunately, the forensic doctor from the capital had never seen the previous situation. He was more suspicious of everything, but he was not very afraid, so he did the autopsy again. After examining for a while, the forensic doctors from the capital also felt that something was wrong. This was because the dozens of corpses that were pieced together looked exactly the same. No matter if they were black or white, fat or thin, tall or short, all the corpses, from their body proportions to their facial structure, were exactly the same. This time, the forensic doctors from the capital couldn't stand it anymore. If the corpses that had been pieced together before were sewn together, they could still explain it. But now, there were dozens of corpses that looked exactly the same. How could they explain it? Eventually, a forensic doctor gathered his courage and took photos of all the corpses. He made a model and drew the corpse's appearance on the computer. According to the police's speculation, there must be a reason for the corpses to look like this. Perhaps there were some clues hidden in it. After the photos were done, the task force studied them for a long time, but they still couldn't figure it out. In the end, the local police accidentally recognized the photo. The person in the photo was Lu Chuanda, who had gone to the police station to ask about the case. Thus, the police didn't hesitate to send their men to bring Lu Chuanda back. Peng Huaiyun was also summoned for questioning due to the new changes in the case. She was asked to explain everything that had happened since she had met Lu Chuanda. After listening to her, I was dumbfounded. I sat there in a daze for a long time. I couldn't figure out why the corpses had turned into Lu Chuanda's appearance. According to what he had told me that day, he had only accepted Peng Huaiyun's request for help and went to the police station to see Fuda and the deputy bureau chief Zhang. Apart from that, he had no contact with the case at all. No matter how I thought about it, this shouldn't have happened. What was the problem? Could it be that Lu Chuanda didn't tell me the truth? My thoughts were a mess, and I couldn't come up with an answer even after a long time. I temporarily put all my thoughts aside and asked Peng Huaiyun. Even so, the police only called Lu Chuanda to assist in the investigation. Why did they say that he couldn't come out? Right now, there's no evidence to prove that Lu Chuanda was directly involved in this case, right? Peng Huaiyun leaned back on the sofa and shook her head. It depends on the police's attitude towards this case. Lu Chuanda should have told you before that the police's original attitude was to turn a big problem into a small one and close the case as soon as possible to avoid causing panic. I nodded. Lu Chuanda had told me that the police wanted to close the case as soon as possible. Thus, Fuda had to die, regardless of whether he had intended to kill or not. Peng Huaiyun continued. However, besides closing the case, the police also suspected that this case was related to some evil cult or other terrorist activities. So, after the people from Beijing came, the police's current attitude was that the investigation would continue. However, as long as they confirmed that everyone involved in this case had to die. Her voice was calm, but my heart shivered. Everyone had to die. This kind of behavior was too cruel. However, when faced with such a horrible case, it seemed that executing everyone involved was the safest way. Otherwise, who knew what would happen in the future? The investigation was one thing. The most important thing wasn't the truth, but the consequences. For the safety of the majority of people, it was reasonable for a small group of people to die. But Lu Chuanda is my man after all. How can I watch him die in such a muddle-headed way? After sitting there and thinking for a long time, I lifted my head to look at Peng Huaiyun. This woman's mental state was too strong. After saying so much calmly, she was still as calm as ever. It should be known that her husband, Fuda, was included in the list of people she said would definitely die. I didn't know why, but I felt some disgust towards this woman, but I still had to ask her about the case in the future. I said to her patiently. I want to save Lu Chuanda, and you want to save your husband. Right now, our interests are the same. If there's any news from the police in the future, can you notify me immediately? Then, I wrote down my current phone number and gave it to her. Peng Huayan picked up the note and glanced at it. Then, she put it back on the table and said, non-committally, "It's not a problem to inform you, but to save him. I don't have much hope. You shouldn't have too much hope either." I didn't answer her. After thanking her, I stood up and left. Xie Chenghua was still waiting in the shop. I had to go back and discuss this with him to see if I could come up with any good ideas. When I returned to the shop, Xie Chenghua was sitting on a chair in the lobby. He was holding a phone in his hand, which was hanging in the air. His face was blank. After I entered the shop, he came back to himself and put down the phone with a distressed face. Then, he saw that my expression wasn't right. So he asked doubtfully, "Boss, already know?" I nodded and sat down on a chair next to him. I sighed. "Brother Lu, this is a big problem. Let's talk about it." Xie Chenghua was still in shock after learning about this strange situation. He nodded at me, but he couldn't say anything. His eyes were still blank. I didn't ask him again, but started to think. To be honest, Lu Chuanda wasn't a good person, and that included Xie Chenghua, who was standing in front of me. After the two of them had lost in the metaphysics exchange competition, they had both wanted to join the Nanyang Taoist faction. They didn't have any sense of national righteousness. However, they were just ordinary people. Their lives had been threatened, and if they didn't join the faction, the taboo in their bodies would have taken effect. Under such circumstances, it wasn't hard to understand why they would put national righteousness as the second priority. Moreover, after they had joined me, they had worked hard to manage my shop. They had helped me a lot. From the perspective of benefits, if I didn't care about Lu Chuanda, would Xie Chenghua still work for me loyally? Thus, Lu Chuanda had to save him. If I wanted to save him, I had to start with the police's attitude. I closed my eyes and thought for a while. Then, my mind became clearer. There was a reason why the police didn't want to let go of anyone. On the surface, it seemed to be for the sake of the big picture. But in fact, the police weren't sure about this case. That was why they were scared and came up with this idea. The only way to make them give up on this idea was to help them figure out the origin of this case. After the police weren't afraid anymore, they would deal with this case differently. Even if they found someone to take charge of this case, they wouldn't find Lu Chuanda. Of course, the premise was that what Lu Chuanda had told me was true. He didn't have anything to do with this case. After thinking it through, I opened my eyes and called Xie Chenghua. I asked him to recall Lu Chuanda's situation and whereabouts before and after the case. Then, he would tell me everything. Xie Chenghua was a little surprised. However, when he saw my serious face, he didn't dare to be negligent. After recalling everything, he began to tell me. His cultivation base wasn't low, and he was knowledgeable and had a good memory. It took him more than half an hour to tell me everything that had happened in the past few days, including Lu Chuanda's whereabouts before I came back. He told me again and again. After listening to him, I was sure that Lu Chuanda didn't have anything to do with this case. According to Xie Chenghua, Lu Chuanda always stayed in the shop. Even if he went out, it was to deal with Wang Yongjun's company. Xie Chenghua had only gone out once or twice a month, and he didn't stay for long. Such a small amount of time wasn't enough for him to participate in such a big case. I didn't believe that Lu Chuanda would be involved in this case. Now that it was confirmed, I didn't doubt him anymore. I directly told Xie Chenghua my idea. After listening to me, Xie Chenghua agreed with me. That was why we started to discuss how to help the police investigate this case. There were many ways to help the police, but we couldn't avoid getting in touch with them. I didn't know the details of this case, but there was no doubt that someone from the Metaphysics Society was involved. Moreover, it was most likely someone from the Metaphysics Society. Chapter 285. After discussing with Xie Chenghua for a long time, we came up with a plan. It was simple. We would let Xie Chenghua come forward and deal with the police. I would hide behind him and direct the investigation. However, we weren't satisfied with this plan. The reason I wasn't satisfied was that this matter was very tricky. The manipulator behind the scenes wouldn't be able to obtain first-hand information. The effect would only be half the result with twice the effort. Only the heavens would know if we could find anything. The reason why Xie Chenghua wasn't satisfied was simple. He was afraid and didn't want to take the risk. He was a timid person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have betrayed the Metaphysics Association and worked for me under my control. It was reasonable for him to be afraid. I didn't want to force him, but there seemed to be no other way. Xie Chenghua and I didn't have a choice. Just as I was about to make a decision, Xie Chenghua seemed to have thought of something. His eyes lit up, and he said to me, "Boss, I suddenly remembered that there was a Taoist family in Macau with the surname Mo. It was said that they were the descendants of the Mahist. Their cultivation wasn't very high, but their family had an ancestral art of making magic tools. They made a living by selling magic tools for generations. They were quite famous. I used to be the president of the Zhuhai branch, which was separated from Macau by a river. I often heard that the Mahist family had a magic tool called the Emo bead. As long as you hold the bead in your hand and use your Dao Qi to activate it, you can change your appearance. It's very magical. No one below the celestial master level will be able to recognize you." I frowned as I understood what he meant. He wanted me to change my appearance and personally act. That way, the problem that we were worried about would be solved. This was a good idea. Guhong's work of the Jin Dynasty, Biopuzi's Inner Chapters, Fanciful View, had a record of the art of disguise. At that time, he mentioned the Mahist Five Elements records, saying that it was the most powerful art of the world's transformation path. Moreover, the Mahist family was famous for their exquisite skills. They were comparable to Liu Ban. If the Mahist family had really passed down this art, it would be normal. However, I had some doubts about the effects of the E-ink bead that Xie Chenghua had mentioned. I asked, "Is this E-ink bead really so miraculous that after using it, no one under the Heavenly Master Realm would be able to detect it?" Everything in the world had its own laws. According to what Xie Chenghua had said, an ordinary dragon-seeking state cultivator with this E-ink pearl could hide from a Heavenly Master state cultivator. This was too absurd. Xie Chenghua nodded his head and said, "That's natural, but this E-ink pearl consumes a lot of Dao Qi. Under the pressure point realm, it is impossible to use it. Even in the pressure point realm, the Dao Qi in your body can only last for less than 10 minutes. Only those in the glory of consciousness realm can truly use it. Boss, since you were able to fight that hunchback old fox and did not fall into a disadvantageous position, your strength is at least in the late stages of glory of consciousness. It should be easy for your Dao Qi to last for more than an hour." After hearing his explanation, the doubts in my heart disappeared. However, what he said made me dumbfounded. Last time, when Xiao Jin scared that hunchback old woman away, I had casually said that I was the one that made Xie Chenghua and Lu Chuanda mistakenly think that my strength was not inferior to that fox spirit's. Now that he'd said it so confidently, my heart felt weak. According to what he had said, the Dao Qi in my body was only at the pressure point perfection realm. Using the E-ink pearl would not last more than 10 minutes. No matter how careful I was, 10 minutes was not enough time for me. What should I do? I awkwardly wanted to explain my situation to Xie Chenghua, but then I thought about it. Although my Dao Qi cultivation was not high, I had the true dragon vein and my recovery speed was top-notch. Moreover, according to my previous experience, when I used the true dragon vein to recover the Dao Qi in my body, it would only take 10 minutes. If that was the case, using the E-ink pearl while secretly absorbing the true dragon vein would be enough for me to maintain the effects of the E-ink pearl. With this thought in mind, I quickly asked about the specific effects of the E-ink pearl and how to obtain it from the Mo family. According to Xie Chenghua, the ink pearl was very magical. Each E-ink pearl could only be used by one person. Moreover, when it was used, not only would the person's appearance change, but the person's body would also change. This change was completely random. So even the Mo family who made the E-ink pearl didn't know what the person would look like after using it. Of course, this randomness only referred to the first time it was used. After using it again, the person's appearance would remain the same as the first time. As for obtaining it, it was simple. The Mo family made a living by selling all kinds of magic tools. Although the ink pearl was magical, as long as the price was right, it could be bought. However, the Mo family was very rich. Ordinary magic tools could be bought with money, but rare treasures like the ink pearl couldn't be bought with money. One could only use precious talismans, magic tools, and other items to exchange for it. Of course, this was only if the Mo family was interested in it. If they weren't interested, then no matter how precious the item was, if they didn't want to exchange it, then there was nothing you could do. After understanding this, I started to think about what I could use to exchange for the talismans. At first, I thought about making golden light divine talismans and pure yang divine talismans. Ordinary yellow talismans wouldn't work, so I could use shaman energy to make scarlet talismans. However, I quickly rejected this idea. The Mo family was an ancient family, and it was hard to say whether they had a heavenly master or not. Last time, I had been chased by the 10 heavenly masters of the Metaphysics Society because of shaman energy. I didn't want to be chased by the Mo family because of this shaman energy talisman. After rejecting this idea, I reluctantly took out some ordinary yellow golden light divine talismans and pure yang divine talismans. Then, I took out the Mount Tai seal that I had gotten from Lu Jinyang. I told Xie Chenhua that the golden light divine talismans and the pure yang divine talismans were part of the 8 great Taoist divine talismans. Even if they were yellow talismans, their value wouldn't be low. Perhaps the Mo family would be interested in them. If they weren't interested, I would add the Mount Tai seal. The Mount Tai seal was one of the inherited magic tools of the Lu family in the capital. Although it didn't have much effect in Lu Jinyang's hands, it was still very valuable. With this, no matter how greedy the Mo family was, it would be enough to satisfy their appetites. Originally, I didn't want to take out the Mount Tai seal. Even if there was a restriction on it, I would be able to remove it one day. Its power would be extraordinary. However, besides the Mount Tai seal, I only had ordinary magic tools. The worst one I had was a square sky fan that Grandpa Li had asked someone to give me. As my power had increased, the square sky fan's power couldn't satisfy my needs. However, I couldn't make up my mind to exchange it for something else. In the end, I had to give up on the Mount Tai seal. Xie Chenhua nodded and promised that he would take the ink bead back as fast as he could. He even asked me if I wanted to go with him. Since he still had the eye restriction on his body, I wasn't worried that he would run away. Moreover, he used to be the president of the Zhuhai Metaphysics branch, so he should have a lot of connections there. Even if I went with him, this matter would be handled by him alone. I wouldn't be able to help him. I simply shook my head and told him that I still had something to do, so I told him to go alone. Shenzhen wasn't far from Zhuhai. After Xie Chenhua left, I waited in the shop until evening. I thought that he would return the next day. Who would have thought that around 11 o'clock at night, Xie Chenhua would come back? As soon as he entered the shop, he excitedly said, "Boss, old Xie didn't disappoint you. I brought the e-ink bead back for you." I hurried to greet him. After asking, I learned that he had gone to Zhuhai. He had quickly used his connections to contact the Mo family. At that time, the Mo family had just made an e-ink bead and were about to sell it. When he took out the items that I had given him, the Mo family was also very interested. Everyone was happy and took the e-ink bead, rushing back in the middle of the night. I took the e-ink bead from his hand and lowered my head to look at it. It was an ink-black bead the size of an egg. It had a smooth luster. At first glance, it looked like a dazzling black pearl. I had thought that the word Mo in the e-ink bead came from the Mo family surname. Now, it seemed that it came from the color of the bead. After inspecting it, I walked to the mirror in the shop and circulated my Tao energy into the e-ink bead. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. In just 10 seconds, in the mirror, I could see my forehead slightly bulging upwards while the sides of my lower jaw retracted. My entire face became much thinner, and my body was basically the same. It was slightly pulled upwards, making my body seem much more slender. Chapter 286. I wasn't the only one who was shocked speechless. Xie Chenhua couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. I've heard people say that the e-ink bead is extraordinary. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, I know that the rumors are true. Boss, even the person who knows you the most wouldn't be able to recognize you, let alone me. I nodded and rubbed my face a few times. After confirming that there was nothing abnormal, I relaxed. I didn't say anything and closed my eyes to feel my Tao energy. Before Xie Changhua returned, I had already taken the jade bracelet from Xiao Jin. Now it was hanging around my neck. After feeling the speed at which my Tao energy was disappearing, I discovered that it was very different from what Xie Changhua had said. With my Tao energy cultivation, I could only maintain it for about 10 minutes. After confirming it, I grabbed the jade bracelet through my clothes and started to absorb the true dragon chi within. After the true dragon chi entered the heavenly veins, the speed at which it was disappearing slowed down. After a while, it completely disappeared. I smiled. It seemed that my estimation was correct. With the true dragon veins' rapid replenishment, the consumption and recovery of Tao energy would reach a balance. This meant that I could use the e-ink bead for an unlimited amount of time. After solving the biggest problem, everything else was easy. I thought for a while and asked Xie Changhua to give me one or two of the magic tools that he carried with him. This was also to hide my identity. The magic tools that I carried, whether it was the Fontian fan or the Yama brush, as well as the golden light and pure yang divine incantations, had all been shown at the Metaphysics Association. As long as someone saw these things, they would most likely think of me. I originally thought that Xie Chenghua's strength wasn't high and that he wouldn't have many magic tools. Who would have thought that when he returned to his room on the second floor, he would take out 3 magic tools for me to choose from? I took a closer look. The first one was a very ordinary green hillock sword, similar to the ones used by Taoist priests. The second one was a tiger bone whip. It was made of the spine of a fierce tiger and had a layer of black light on it. It looked very mystical. The third item was a chain. It was hard to tell what material it was made of, but both sides of the chain were black and white. It seemed to contain the yin and yang intent of Yama's brush. It was also extraordinary. Without waiting for me to choose, Xie Changhua first introduced it to me. This tiger bone whip is made from the third vertebrae of a 100-year-old fierce tiger. It has an innate ability to destroy evil spirits. Moreover, after Tao energy is injected into it, it will automatically release a tiger's roar, shaking people's spirits and destroying their will. It is considered an excellent high-rank magic tool. Also, this yin-yang locket is surrounded by yin and yang qi. It can injure a person's soul, and it's extremely powerful. I casually picked up the 2 magical tools and studied them. I nodded. Xie Changhua was right. These 2 magical tools were extraordinary. Although they couldn't compare to the Yama brush in my hand, they were much better than the square sky fan. I really didn't expect Xie Changhua to have such a treasure in his hands. It seems that the position of the metaphysics branch's president is quite lucrative. After comparing them, I finally chose the first one, the Azure Hillock Sword. Although the power of the last 2 magical tools was extraordinary, after entering the glorious consciousness realm, I had already started to study the astral steps recorded in the death scripture. When facing an enemy, using the astral steps was enough. The magical tools in my hand weren't important. Moreover, these 2 magical tools were very valuable. They were definitely Xie Chenghua's favorite. I was very grateful that he was willing to take them out, but if it wasn't necessary, it was better not to use them. On the other hand, the Azure Hillock Sword was the most common magical tool. The future of this matter was uncertain. Who knew what kind of trouble might happen in the future? If someone were to investigate, the Azure Hillock Sword definitely wouldn't be able to find anything. With the magical tools settled, it was easy to think of a fake identity. The name Zhang Wenli that I used previously was not bad. These problems weren't difficult. There was only one last problem that I hadn't made up my mind on, and that was how to sneak into the police station. After thinking for a while, I first asked Xie Changhua if he had any connections in this area. He used to be the president of the Zhuhai branch and had a lot of connections. Perhaps he would have a way. In the end, Xie Changhua shook his head without hesitation. This case involves too many people. My connections in the past won't be of much use. If he can't do it, then the only way left is through Wang Yongjun. I didn't hesitate and directly called him. I didn't tell Wang Yongjun my plan, but told him that I had a friend who was also a person in the metaphysics world. He was very skilled in feng shui and was very interested in this case. He wanted to cooperate with the police and investigate this case together. I asked him if he had any way for my friend to sneak in. Since I had asked him about this case before, Wang Yongjun also knew the nature of this case. Hearing my words, he was in a difficult position. He hesitated and said, "I'm afraid this matter won't be easy to handle." I tried my best to persuade him. In the end, I even hinted to him that as long as this matter could be handled, no matter what happened in the future, as long as I could help, I would definitely help. Wang Yongjun finally nodded. I can find the provincial leader who helped me last time. He's in charge of the public security, so he should have a way. After getting his promise, I finally heaved a sigh of relief. Then, I just had to wait for his news. Wang Yongjun's work efficiency had always been high. After more than an hour, he called me and said that the provincial leader wanted to see my friend. He asked me to bring some people with me to meet him. Of course, I couldn't play two roles at the same time. I had to tell him that I was busy and couldn't leave, but I could let my friend go there directly. Wang Yongjun nodded and agreed. Then, he asked for the address and said that he would drive there personally. Then, we would visit the provincial leader together. Because of this case, the leader was in Shenzhen, which could save us a lot of trouble. Not long after I hung up the phone, Wang Yongjun drove to my shop. At this moment, I was still using the e-ink bead. I had purposely changed my clothes and brought a sword case with me. After putting the azure hillock sword in, I followed Wang Yongjun into the car and set off. Along the way, Wang Yongjun kept talking to me. I was worried that I would expose myself, so I pretended to be a man of few words. I only told him that I was friends with Lu Chuanda and Zhou Yi. This time, I had to investigate this case to save Lu Chuanda. Of course, Wang Yongjun didn't doubt me. He drove me all the way to the Municipal Public Security Bureau. In the past 2 years, Wang Yongjun had relied on the locations I had chosen for him to build new factories. He had received a lot of orders, and his business had become bigger and bigger. In the entire business circle of Shenzhen, he could be considered an influential figure. When we arrived at the Municipal Public Security Bureau, he didn't even get out of the car. He just rolled down the window to greet me and swaggered in. After we got out of the car, Wang Yongjun took me to a small office building behind the main building. After we got in, we directly went to the top floor. On the way, Wang Yongjun told me that the provincial leader was called Lu Qingji. He was the third in command in the province. He was in charge of Shenzhen, and the top floor was his temporary office. When we reached the top floor, as soon as we got out of the elevator, 2 armed policemen who were standing guard next to us stopped us. Wang Yongjun made a phone call. Soon, a person who looked like his secretary came. The 2 armed policemen let us go. Then, under Secretary Wang's lead, Wang Yongjun and I went to the only office on the top floor to meet Lu Qingji. Lu Qingji was around 50 years old. With his status, he wasn't considered old. Although he wore a solemn expression, he took the initiative to stand up after we entered. He smiled at Wang Yongjun and asked, "Old Wang, is this the mysterious master you were talking about? He doesn't look that old to me." Wang Yongjun smiled awkwardly. Master Zhang is indeed young, but his cultivation isn't low. With him joining us, it will be a great help to this case. His words were dry. Although he was flattering, he didn't say anything valuable. A person like Lu Qingji wouldn't be easy to fool. I was a little anxious. I didn't wait for Lu Qingji to speak and took a step forward. I cupped my hands and pretended to be arrogant. I am the descendant of Zhang Yi, the successor of the Ghost Valley. I have been practicing feng shui since I was young. When I heard about this tragic case, I felt indignant. I don't dare to say that with my participation, this case will be solved, but it will be of help. Chapter 287. Of course, these words were just nonsense. Because of my age, Lu Qingji was suspicious of my identity as a metaphysics master. Wang Yongjun couldn't say anything from the side. At this time, if I showed the slightest bit of a guilty conscience, I reckoned that this matter would be ruined. Left with no choice, I could only use the tiger's skin and act as arrogantly as possible. Coincidentally, my surname was Zhang. Zhang Yi's name popped up in my head, so I used it. Zhang Yi was a master of the school of vertical and horizontal during the pre-Qin dynasty. At the same time, he was also a grandmaster in the history of metaphysics. His teacher, Gui Guzi, was even more famous. Not to mention people in the metaphysics world, he was also very famous among ordinary people. As expected, after hearing my words, Wang Yongjun and Lu Qingji were shocked. Lu Qingji didn't answer me, but turned to look at Wang Yongjun. I had added this identity at the last minute, so I didn't tell Wang Yongjun beforehand. However, a person like Wang Yongjun was very clever. When he saw Lu Qingji's eyes move to him, he didn't hesitate and nodded. He forced a smile and said, "Before Master Zhang came, he told me that his family has been in decline for many years, so I shouldn't mention his ancestor's name." Who knew that Master Zhang would say it himself before I said anything? Wang Yongjun's words were very clever. On one hand, he explained why he didn't mention my identity, and on the other hand, he used a joking method to dissolve the harshness in my words, which eased the atmosphere a lot. As expected, after hearing his words, Lu Qingji smiled and said, "It's an honor to meet you." He politely invited me to sit down and started to talk about Zhang Yi and Mr. Gui Guzi. He wasn't a metaphysics person, so he talked about academics and history. I was just making things up, so how could I know their history? Fortunately, I had a good understanding of their achievements in metaphysics. That was why I took the initiative to talk about metaphysics. Lu Qingji listened with great interest and didn't reveal any flaws. After talking for a while, Lu Qingji didn't mention anything about that case. He didn't say whether he wanted me to join the team or not. Instead, he took a jade crane pendant from his neck and carefully held it in his hand, handing it to me. After I received it, Lu Qingji said, "This is a magical tool that I got from the vice president of the Taoist Association, Taoist Master Zhao of the Baiyin Temple. Master Zhang, you could take a look at it." I frowned and didn't understand what he meant. I lowered my head to look at the pendant. Originally, when I heard him say that it was an artifact, I didn't take it seriously. I thought it was just a general term for ordinary people. However, when I looked carefully, the light on the crane's pendant was restrained, and its brilliance was faintly discernible. I didn't even need to test it with my Dao Qi to confirm that it was indeed an artifact. I didn't take it seriously when he told me that it was a magical tool. I thought it was just a general term for ordinary people. However, when I looked at it carefully, I saw that the crane pendant had a faint light. I didn't need to test it with my Taoist Qi to confirm that it was a magical tool. After reading it, I was about to return the crane pendant to him and say some compliments. However, Lu Qingji continued, "When he gave me this magic tool, Taoist Zhao of the White Cloud Temple gave it a blessing and made the crane inside the pendant flap its wings once. At that time, Taoist Zhao said that once the crane flapped its wings, it could guarantee me a promotion. Not long after that, I was transferred from Beijing to Guangdong. My career took a big step forward. Unfortunately, after I was transferred to Guangdong, I haven't been back to Beijing for more than a year. I wanted to ask Taoist Master Zhao to bless me again, but I didn't have the time or the opportunity. I'm very lucky to have met Master Zhang today. It's fate that brought us together. I wonder if I can ask Master Zhang to bless my crane pendant again?" Then he looked at me with his bright eyes. My heart shivered. Lu Yongji wasn't asking for my help. He was testing me. I guess he didn't believe what I'd said earlier. Or, even if he did believe me, he didn't care. He didn't agree to my request because of what I said. He wanted to use this crane pendant to test me. His meaning was clear. If I could bless the crane pendant once, he would agree to my request. If I couldn't, he wouldn't kick me out. However, I shouldn't even think about it. I didn't say anything and lower my head to look at the crane pendant. If Lu Qingji said that the crane pendant could flap its wings when it was blessed, it proved that this crane pendant wasn't an ordinary magical tool. There must be something special about it. Indeed, when I turned the crane pendant over, I saw a peony petal engraved on its back. It had a faint fluctuation of Tao energy. I thought for a moment and understood. The peony petal looked like a picture, but in fact, the lines outlined a Tao Chi formation. The red-crowned crane flapping its wings that Lu Qingji had mentioned was probably related to this formation. I tried to move the Tao energy in my body and pour it into the formation. Then, I stared at the vivid crane in front of me. Not long after, the crane's wings visibly shook. My guess was right. The so-called crane spreading its wings was the special effect of this formation, and the so-called blessing was naturally to inject enough Taoist qi into the formation. During this period of time, I had injected nearly 1/3 of my qi of the way into the crane, and only then did it move its wings slightly. There was still a long way to go before the crane could spread its wings. Even if I injected all my qi of the way, it would still be difficult for the crane to spread its wings. However, I had the true dragon's vein. If I didn't have a time limit, I could slowly convert my Tao energy and pour it into the formation. Eventually, the crane would flap its wings. With that thought, I lifted my head and said, Taoist Master Zhao of the Baiyun Temple is the vice president of the Taoist Association. His skills have reached perfection. I can't compare to him. Hearing what I said, Lu Qingji's expression darkened. I didn't wait for him to speak and continued with a smile. However, I can barely make a blessing for this magic tool. It's just that my cultivation isn't high enough, so it might take a long time. Lu Qingji's expression softened a little. He asked, how long does Master Zhang need? I calculated in my heart and said, 2 hours is enough. 2 hours was enough for me to absorb 10 times more Tao energy from the true dragon's vein. It was even more than the initial stage of glorious consciousness. It was enough to fill up the formation of this strange magic tool. Lu Qingji was overjoyed and quickly said, 2 hours isn't long. If it's convenient for Master Zhang, why don't you make a blessing in my office? Xiao Wang and I can wait outside to give Master Zhang some quiet space. The change in his attitude was huge. Just now, he looked like he was interrogating me. Now, he even took the initiative to let me use his office. However, after thinking about it, the effects of the crane pendant weren't ordinary. It could affect his career. Making a blessing meant a promotion. Compared to that, giving up his office was nothing. I nodded and agreed. Lu Chuanda had already been captured for more than a day. There was no time to waste. The sooner Lu Qingji's matter was done, the sooner he could calm down. After the two of them left, I sat down cross-legged and held the crane pendant between my palms. I absorbed the dragon energy from the true dragon's vein and converted it into Tao energy to transfer to the crane pendant. After repeating this for more than an hour, I felt that the Tao energy in the formation of the crane pendant was very abundant. The crane's wings were trembling more and more. It wasn't far from spreading its wings. Lu Qingji was an ordinary person, so he couldn't see how abundant the Tao energy was. He could only find some clues from the crane spreading its wings. Thus, it was better for him to see the crane spreading its wings with his own eyes. Thus, I temporarily stopped the transfer of Tao energy and called out to Secretary Wang. Soon, Secretary Wang walked in. It was obvious that he had received the order. After entering, he asked me if I had completed it. After getting an affirmative answer, he hurriedly went out and called Lu Qingji and Wang Yongjun back. The two of them looked excited, especially Lu Qingji. His face was slightly red. He continuously rubbed his hands and hurriedly ran in. When he saw me, he slowed down and carefully walked over. He respectfully asked me, Master Zhang, is the blessing done? Chapter 288. Lu Qingji's pendant was made of soft white jade. The exquisite carving of the crane looked as if it had come to life in just a blink of an eye. It gently flapped its wings, and the entire pendant glowed with a beautiful light. Although it was the result of the Tao energy I had poured into the pendant, I was still mesmerized by it. Lu Qingji and Wang Yongjun were even more mesmerized. Lu Qingji wore an infatuated face, and he was so excited that his face was flushed. Wang Yongjun, on the other hand, opened his eyes and stared at the pendant without blinking. After the crane retracted its wings for a long time, Lu Qingji used both hands to carefully pick up the pendant and put it on his neck. Then he laughed cheerfully. After laughing, he looked at me with a blushing face. His voice didn't sound suspicious anymore. Instead, it sounded careful and respectful. Master Zhang, you're worthy of being a descendant of an aristocratic family. At such a young age, you have a high cultivation base. You're not inferior to Taoist Zhao from the Baiyun Temple. You're really admirable. His compliment was a little excessive. The Baiyun Temple was one of the 3 great ancestral halls of the Chuanjin branch. The headquarters of the Taoist Association was also located there. Taoist Zhao was the vice president of the Taoist Association and the leader of the Chuanjin branch. Even if his cultivation base wasn't at the Heavenly Master realm, it shouldn't be much lower. He wasn't someone I could compare to. I smiled and replied politely. Then, the topic shifted back to the matter I was here for. This time, Lu Qingji didn't say anything perfunctory. He patted his chest and told me that he needed a metaphysics expert to help him. He was worried about where to find such a person, and I came at the right time. I couldn't help but laugh. Just now, he had doubted me, and now he said, I know everything about me. Then, I asked him when he would be able to join the case. Lu Qingji told me that the capital would send a team of experts tomorrow. He asked me to come with him. We would receive this team of experts and work together with him on this case. I frowned. Last time, he told me that the capital had sent a special task force. This time, it was a team of experts, and they wanted me to study the case with them. Did this team of experts consist of people from the metaphysics world? I didn't think too much about it. In any case, my current identity and appearance were quite different from before. Even if I met someone I knew, they wouldn't be able to find any clues. After confirming this matter, I didn't pester him anymore. I chatted with Lu Qingji about other things. Of course, I couldn't stop talking about Lu Qingji's future. He kept asking me about his future. He even hinted that I should perform divination for him. I didn't know if I should laugh or cry. It took me a while to explain to him that not all geomancy masters studied divination. I didn't know much about it. Although Lu Qingji was disappointed, he didn't say anything. He smiled and changed the topic. I, on the other hand, didn't have the patience to stay here any longer. I stood up and tactfully said goodbye. After leaving the police station, Wang Yongjun asked me while driving. Master Zhang, there's something I don't know if I should ask. Oh, Wang Yongjun's polite tone surprised me at first. Then, I realized that I was Zhang Wenli, not Zhou. Wang Yongjun wasn't familiar with me, so it was normal for me to be polite. I smiled and said, Brother Wang, if you have something to say, just say it. In addition, Zhou Yi and I are life and death friends. Brother Wang, you don't have to be so polite. Just call me Brother Zhang. Wang Yongju nodded and called me Brother Zhang. Then, with some worry, he continued, Lu Qingji pushed the matter to tomorrow. Obviously, he still has some doubts about Brother Zhang's identity. I guess he will do some investigation later. He is a member of the public security system. It's easy for him to check a person's identity. So, I want to ask Brother Zhang, are you really Zhang Yi's descendant, the Phantom Valley successor? I spread my hands. How is that possible? I was just making up an identity in order to calm him down. Wang Yongjun wasn't surprised by my answer. Obviously, he didn't believe me. He was different from Lu Qingji. He wasn't blinded by the prospect of an official career. He knew a lot about metaphysics. Naturally, he wouldn't believe my nonsense. After getting a definite answer, Wang Yongjun said, Brother Zhang, what do you plan to do now? Lu Qingji will definitely check it out. In such a short time, I'm afraid it's a little difficult to make a fake identity. How about this? I still have some friends in Macau. I can ask them to make a fake identity for you. Lu Qingji won't be able to find it there. That's good. Wang Yongjun's words were affectionate. He had thought of the problem that I hadn't thought of, and he had even given me a solution. Whether it was for Zhang Wenli's sake or for Zhou Yi's sake, I was very grateful. I hurriedly thanked him, but he didn't seem to care. He waved his hand and said, Brother Zhang, you're welcome. You're Zhou Yi's best friend, so you're also my best friend. It's not a big deal to help me. As for making a fake identity in Macau, it's not difficult. However, everything there is tightly controlled. I'm afraid it will take some time. You have to delay it for a few days. I hesitated, then shook my head and said, there's no need to go through so much trouble. It doesn't matter if I have this identity or not. Anyway, I said that my family has fallen, and I've lived in seclusion since childhood. Where can Lu Qingji find it? Wang Yongjun obviously disagreed with my statement. He said that Lu Qingji could easily find my information by using the public security system. However, under my insistence, he could only sigh and no longer insist. However, his face was full of worry. Obviously, he didn't think much of what I was doing. Zhang Wenli was an alias, and even my current appearance was fake. It was impossible for Lu Qingji to find any information. Even if he was suspicious, he would think of my identity as a descendant of a secluded family, so he probably wouldn't think much of it. People were creatures of profit. Lu Qingji had tasted the sweetness of the fallen crane. If I could use it once, he would definitely want to use it a second time. Based on this point alone, he wouldn't make things difficult for me. On the other hand, if I really made a fake identity, there would be flaws. It would be the same even if I went to Macau, like Wang Yongjun said. However, it wasn't appropriate for me to tell him this, so I had to pretend to be unreasonable. I'll explain it to him when I have the chance in the future. After returning to the shop, that night, I deliberately called Wang Yongjun again and thanked him with my identity as Zhou Yi. Wang Yongjun smiled and said that it was nothing. It was what he should do, and he didn't mention anything else. The night passed uneventfully. The next morning, Wang Yongjun came to pick me up again. This time, he only sent me to the Municipal Public Security Bureau and then left. However, before he left, he told me that if Lu Qingji found anything, I could contact him if I needed his help. After Wang Yongjun left, I went to Lu Qingji's office alone. Lu Qingji had obviously told them about me, so no one stopped me along the way. When I saw Lu Qingji, he was sitting behind his desk, dealing with some documents. When he saw me come in, he put down what he was doing, smiled, and asked me to sit down and rest. Then, he asked Secretary Wang to make me some tea and asked me to wait for a while. After he finished his work, he would take me to meet the expert team from Beijing. At this moment, I heaved a sigh of relief. When I told Wang Yongjun yesterday, although I was confident, I was still a little worried. Now, it seemed that Lu Qingji was right. He didn't find anything. After about an hour, Lu Qingji finally finished his work. After he stopped, he looked at the time and said that the expert team was about to arrive. Then, he took me to the big office building outside. After meeting the other leaders of the Municipal Public Security Bureau, we waited there for a while. Then, two black commercial vehicles drove in from the entrance and stopped in front of the office building. In the first car, a thin old man with a slightly stooped body got out, followed by a young man and a young woman. They both carried a big backpack on their backs and held a few thick books in their hands. Secretary Wang, who was standing next to me, whispered to me, "They are Professor Liang and his two students from the expert team." After they got out of the car, the door of the second car also opened. 3 people got out of the car. When I saw the 3 of them, my eyes instantly widened, because out of the 3 of them, I know 2 of them. Chapter 289. When I saw Qin Yangting, my face darkened. At the same time, I was puzzled. How did he get together with Han Wennan? One of them was from a metaphysical family, while the other was a Taoist priest from Mount Longhu. They didn't have anything to do with each other. Who had sent them to investigate this case? While I was deep in thought, Lu Qingji and the other leaders came to greet them. After greeting them, they called me over and introduced us to each other. I knew Han Wennan and Qin Yangting, and the bald, middle-aged monk was a monk. His Buddhist name was Miao Ju. He was a monk from the reclining Buddha temple in the suburbs of Beijing. I thought to myself, 3 people, one mysterious, one Taoist, and one monk. Could it be that the Metaphysics Society, the Taoist Association, and the Buddhist Association have their eyes on this case? When Lu Qingji finished introducing me as the descendant of the Ghost Valley, the 3 of them were startled. Han Wennan and Miao Ju politely greeted each other, but Qin Yangting's mouth twitched and he snorted disdainfully. At this moment, I had already concealed the hatred in my heart, but I still put on an arrogant expression in order to match my identity. I just stood there and didn't say anything. After Lu Qingji and the other leaders received the guests, they left. After they left, someone took us to an office on the third floor of the office building. The office has been arranged for the team of experts. The white-haired Professor Liang was a workaholic. As soon as he sat down in the office, he wanted to read the case file. On the other hand, the few people from the metaphysics world were leisurely sitting there with nothing to do. I asked the people from the municipal bureau. They said that after Professor Liang and the others finished reading the file, they would go to the crime scene to investigate. I went to Professor Liang and asked for the file. I started to read it. Since this was a big case, the police's files were very detailed. They included the identities of the people involved, their experiences, and even their parents and spouses. In addition, many photos of the crime scene were also included in the file. When I heard Lu Chuanda's story, I could imagine how bloody and terrifying the crime scene was. Now that I saw the photos of the body parts, I was even more frightened. However, after reading for a long time, I didn't find anything useful. I put down the file and lifted my head. Professor Liang and his two students were standing not far from me. They were holding the photos and measuring them with a ruler while writing them down with a pen. Since they were professionals, I couldn't find anything even after a long time. Since they had started to record, it was clear that they had learned the ropes. I didn't want to read too much. Instead, I searched for information related to Lu Chuanda. However, after a long time, I could only find Lu Chuanda's file. I couldn't find any photos or information related to the crime scene. I went to ask the person in charge of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. He told me that this case was too strange, and the higher-ups had ordered that no written documents or photos were allowed to appear. However, when the time came, we could go to the scene to investigate. I had nothing to do, so I sat down and closed my eyes to rest. During this time, Qin Yangting came to see me. I guessed he was bored, so he asked about my family's inheritance and my identity as the heir of the Ghost Valley. From his words, it was clear that he wanted to expose me. Unfortunately, Zhang Yi and Gue Guzi were from the Pre-Qin dynasty. No matter how I talked, he couldn't find any flaws in my story. The next day was almost the same. Everyone was waiting for Professor Liang to finish reading the files. Then, they would go to the crime scene to investigate. At noon on the third day, Professor Liang finally finished reading all the files. The municipal bureau sent someone to take us to the crime scene. In the group of experts, there were many people from the Metaphysics Society who had come because of the body reconstruction case. That was why Professor Liang had the authority to investigate the earlier events. According to his instructions, our first stop was Yu Fuda's attic. On the way there, everyone still looked calm and indifferent. But when they arrived at the orchard and arrived at the attic of Yu Fuda's house, the group of people's expressions became tense. Including me, everyone in the group of experts knew what had happened here. Although Han Wenan and the others had high cultivation bases, they were still scared. Professor Liang wore a calm face. He was the first one to push open the sealed door and walk in. We hurried to follow him. In a narrow attic, all the bloody things that had happened that day had been taken away as evidence. At this moment, only white dots were left in the room. After entering the attic and looking at the thick white dots, I recalled what Lu Chuanda had told me. I didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but I felt a chill run down my spine. Professor Liang was walking in the front. He didn't care about the white dots on the wall. Instead, he took his two students and went to the shrine at the end of the attic. Everything else was taken away as evidence, but the shrine on the wall and the bloody mural on the shrine couldn't be taken away. They had to stay there. At that moment, Professor Liang was looking at the mural of human blood in the shrine. After a while, Professor Liang suddenly turned around and said to his female student, Xiao Xian, "Bring me that book." Professor Liang had introduced his two students to me earlier. The boy with the glasses was called Ling Duyu, and the girl was called Mu Xian. They seemed to be a couple, and their behavior was intimate. Professor Liang received an old book that was as thick as a brick from the female student. He put the glasses on and flipped through it. Then, he placed the page on the wall. It seemed he wanted to compare it with the mural on the wall. I moved closer to take a look. Sure enough, there was also a crude drawing on the page. It was a drawing of a large bird with its wings spread wide. The feathers on its wings were long and numerous, and the feathers on its tail were also extremely long. The mural on the wall was also a drawing of a bird. However, after looking at it for a long time, I didn't find anything similar. The drawing of the bird on the wall was even rougher. Since it was drawn sideways, only one side of its wings and feet was drawn. Moreover, I couldn't see the length of the feathers on its wings. It was just a thick line. The tail was the same. It was just a thick line with a fork at the bottom. Moreover, it wasn't very long. It was completely different from the bird in the book. Professor Liang pointed at the drawing on the page and said, "It seems I wasn't wrong. It's the mystic bird that was recorded in the book." Before I could say anything, Han Wenan asked skeptically, "Professor Liang, forgive me for my poor eyesight, but these two drawings are very different. How could they be the same?" Professor Liang looked very excited. He was using his hand to draw the lines of the drawing on the mural. He didn't answer, but impatiently waved his hand at the two students behind him. The bespectacled boy, Ling Diu, explained, "These two pictures both record totems from the ancient times. They look different on the surface, but in fact, if you look closely, you'll find that in the two pictures, the proportion of the bird's wings is the same. Although the length of the tail feathers is different, the tip of the tail is bifurcated, and the proportion is exactly the same. As totems develop, they will inevitably change. However, there are some important parts that won't change. The totem in these two drawings is the mystic bird. The mystic bird's original form is a swallow. That's why its tail is the key. No matter which drawing it is, you can clearly see that its tail is a swallow's tail." As soon as he said that, people hurried to look at the tail feathers of the two drawings. Indeed, it was as he had said. Although the tail feathers of the two birds were different, no matter which drawing it was, they could still clearly recognize that it was a swallow's tail. Chen Yanting was surprised. "You can recognize that it's the mystic bird. What's next? What's the special significance of the mystic bird? What does it have to do with this case?" This time, Han Wenan didn't wait for Professor Liang and his student to speak. He directly said, "The book of poetry says that the mystic bird was destined to descend and give birth to the Shang dynasty. That's why the mystic bird is the totem of the Shang dynasty." After saying that, Han Wenan opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something else. However, he didn't say anything. The others didn't seem to notice, or perhaps they noticed it but didn't care. Only I knew what Han Wenan wanted to say. Chapter 290. Most of the people in the world knew the truth, but they didn't know why. Everyone in the celestial sect would worship the mysterious daughter of the nine heavens. But those who knew that the mysterious daughter of the nine heavens was a mysterious bird were probably only those who had a long history of metaphysics. As for me, I came across this record in the death scripture. Because of this, the profound maiden of the nine heavens was like Shakyamuni to the disciples of Buddhism, or the Tao fathers of the three purities to the disciples of Taoism. She was their faith and spiritual sustenance. At this moment, suddenly seeing that such a heartless murder case was related to the mystic bird painting, Han Wenan hesitated and did not say that this connection was also human nature. Even I felt somewhat gloomy. The picture on the wall was that of the mysterious bird. Yu Fuda had killed so many people and used human sacrifices as sacrifices. Could it be that he was sacrificing the mysterious woman of the nine heavens? How is this possible? Upon hearing Han Wenan's explanation, Ling Diu pushed up his glasses and said with an honest smile, "Big brother Han is right." According to the historical records, Shang-Chi's mother, Jiandi, gave birth to Shang-Chi after swallowing a mystic bird's egg in the suburbs. Shang-Chi was the son of Emperor Ku and the half-brother of Emperor Yao. He was also the ancestor of the Shang clan and the ancestor of Cheng Tang, the founder of the Shang dynasty. Therefore, the Shang clan, as well as the Shang dynasty that came after it, used the mystic bird as their totem. This is also the origin of the saying, "The mystic bird of heaven descended to give birth to the Shang dynasty." "I see." Chen Yangting nodded, not fully understanding. He then asked, "Thousands of years have passed since the Shang dynasty. Could it be that the murderer was possessed by a ghost from thousands of years ago when he worshipped the mystic bird? As he said this, his expression turned serious. The longer Ain's soul stays in the world, the heavier the baleful yang energy in the body. To be able to resist the baleful yang energy for thousands of years, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that he has already cultivated Ain's soul. Ain's soul that had cultivated the Ain spirit was Ain's spirit. It was comparable to a human heavenly master. Its power was not to be underestimated. It was not difficult to understand why Chun Yangting's expression changed drastically. However, Han won in, and I didn't think it was a big deal. The people of the mysterious gate all worshipped the fairy of the ninth heaven, and we didn't see anyone from the Shang dynasty. Apart from the two of us, Miao Ju had a calm and collected look on his face the whole time. His expression did not change at all. Professor Liang and the others didn't know anything about the Yin spirit or the Yang spirit, so they didn't care. Qin Yangting was snubbed, so he shut his mouth and didn't say anything else. However, the relaxed expression on his face was gone, and his expression became much more serious. Clearly, he was on his guard. At this moment, Professor Liang's hands were already on the mystic bird mural. He followed the lines on it and touched it all the way down. When he reached the end, he reached out his hand and touched a spot marked with a white dot for a while. Suddenly, he said, "I remember the file saying that there was originally a small cauldron here, right? Little Xian, find a photo of that small cauldron." Following his instructions, Mu Xian quickly took out a few large photos from her backpack and handed them over. Professor Liang lowered his head and looked at them carefully. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. However, when I heard the word small cauldron, my heart was moved. I took 2 steps forward and stood next to Professor Liang, looking at the photo in his hand. As soon as I saw this small cauldron, my heart suddenly shook. I've seen this small cauldron before. No, to be precise, I've seen one too. Back in Meizhou, after Zhang Kanwen had kidnapped Zhang Xingqing, I had searched his house. I found a small, dark cauldron the size of a cigarette case. It was exactly the same as the small cauldron in the photo in front of me. At that time, when I was studying that small cauldron, I had poured my Tao energy into it, but it was almost sucked dry. The small cauldron didn't have any strange effects, so I had put it in my luggage. I had never taken it out to check it, and it was still in my feng shui metaphysics shop. Does this small cauldron have anything to do with my small cauldron? After thinking for a while, I pulled myself together and asked Professor Liang, "Can you show me the picture?" At this moment, Professor Liang had finished looking at the picture. He was frowning and thinking. When he heard me, he threw the photos to me. I received them and quickly checked them. Soon, I found something different. This small cauldron was the same size as my small cauldron. The only difference was the writing on the front. The small cauldron I had gotten from Zhang Xingqing had the word Liang carved on it, but this small cauldron had the word Ji carved on it. The writing was the same as the one on the Death Sutra silk scroll. The difference was that the character Liang on the small cauldron was Yin, which meant that it was carved on the Ding body. However, the character Ji on this cauldron was Yang, which meant that it was carved on the surface of the cauldron. The small cauldron had the character Liang on it, so I didn't think too much about it. However, the character Ji on this cauldron made me think of Jizhou, Liang Prefecture, Yongzhou, Qingzhou, and so on. An absurd idea popped up in my head. According to the legends, in the early years of the Xia dynasty, Yu the Great divided the world into 9 prefectures. He asked the prefecture overseer of the 9 prefectures to provide bronze to forge 9 cauldrons, which symbolized the 9 prefectures. Were these 2 small cauldrons 2 of the legendary 9 cauldrons? As soon as this idea popped up in my head, I denied it. It was impossible. The 9 cauldrons were the national treasures of the Qin dynasty. Holding the 9 cauldrons meant that one could rule the world. According to the legends, the 9 cauldrons have been lost during the Qin dynasty. Moreover, the 9 cauldrons were gigantic, and the cauldrons had engravings of the sun, moon, stars, birds, beasts, famous mountains, great rivers, and all kinds of strange things in the 9 prefectures. These 2 small cauldrons were only as big as my palm. Besides some patterns, there were no drawings of mountains or rivers on the cauldrons. Thus, they couldn't be the legendary 9 cauldrons. However, when I had poured my Tao energy into them, what was the reason for that strange phenomenon? After thinking for a long time, I couldn't figure it out. I returned the picture to Professor Liang and asked, Professor Liang, this cauldron has the character G on it. Could it be one of the legendary 9 cauldrons? Professor Liang was an expert in this field, so he knew more than me. Perhaps he knew the origin of these small cauldrons. However, Professor Liang didn't answer me. Instead, he turned around and looked at me in surprise. How do you know the character G? As far as I know, this character isn't written in Chinese or seal script. It's even different from the Oracle Bone script. How do you know it? I was startled. Now, I understood that I had become interested in this character because of the Death Sutra Silk Scroll. Later on, I had searched for a lot of information to learn about this character. In fact, Chinese characters were hieroglyphics. This type of script was somewhat similar to the Oracle Bone script, as well as the Great Seal script and the Small Seal script. In terms of shape, it looked like a script that was in between the Oracle Bone script and the Seal script. Anyone who had studied these characters would be able to recognize it. I pulled myself together and smiled. I've studied calligraphy. This character isn't too different from the Seal script. Of course, I can recognize the character. Professor Liang nodded and took the picture from my hand. He sighed. I don't think it's one of the 9 cauldrons. However, from the looks of it, it should be related to the human sacrifice culture of the Shang dynasty. Human sacrifice culture? I was bewildered. This was a term I had never heard before. What is the human sacrifice culture? The others gathered around to listen to Professor Liang's answer. This time, Professor Liang wasn't as absent-minded as before. After a moment of silence, he said, In recent years, archaeologists have excavated a shocking number of corpses in the Yin ruins of Anyang. The Oracle Bone script they unearthed shows that they died in the bloody sacrificial ceremony of the Shang dynasty. I once participated in an excavation. At that time, it was next to a palace in the Yin ruins. There were more than 100 sacrificial pits, and there were nearly 600 corpses. Most of the corpses were decapitated and thrown into the pits. 2 pits also contained the corpses of 17 children who had died tragically. When the foundation of the palace was laid, it was also accompanied by a sacrificial ceremony. All the pillars were built with a corpse, and the gate was built on top of the remains of 15 people. 3 of them only had their heads left. It was said that there was a human sacrificial ground in the tomb area of the Shang king's tomb. It was twice the size of a football field. There were nearly 3,500 human skeletons buried in more than 900 sacrificial pits. Many of the skeletons were decapitated. Some pits only had their skulls or bodies buried. There were even people who were still struggling to be buried. There were also sacrificial sites outside the royal tomb area. For example, there was a pit at the back of the hill. There were 73 skeletons buried there. Most of them were male teenagers under the age of 20. There were even more than 10 skeletons of children. Wherever the Shang dynasty went, such as Yanshi and Hunan, the early Shang dynasty ruins in Zhengzhou, and even Tangshan and Jiangsu, there were large-scale human sacrificial sites. Over the years, natural and man-made changes have destroyed the Yin ruins. It is impossible to know how many such human sacrificial sites existed in the entire Shang dynasty. These sites were from different eras, which means that the practice of human sacrifice had been going on for many years. It wasn't the product of a tyrant's whims. It was the norm of a civilization. The secrets of the archaeological world were completely different from the history that we had been exposed to since we were young. Hearing Professor Liang's words, everyone was stunned. Professor Liang didn't seem to notice. He continued, In recent years, the archaeological world has confirmed this theory, but hasn't been confirmed yet. In this case, I don't know what you're talking about, but I know it's related to the human sacrifice culture. Let's not talk about this. Let's go to the cellar and check it out. Then, he took the lead and walked outside. The others, including me, were still immersed in the secrets that Professor Liang had told us. When he pushed the door open, I woke up. I didn't have time to sigh and followed him. The cellar wasn't far from Yufuda's house. We could reach it in 2 or 3 minutes. It was different from Yufuda's house. Not only was there a seal, but there was also a big rock blocking the entrance. In the end, Han Wennan and the others had to go there to move the rock away. Although it was broad daylight, the cellar was still pitch black. Only a beam of white light shone through the entrance. However, it could only illuminate the area around the entrance. It didn't help much. I didn't know how Yufuda had killed and dismembered people in the dark. Fortunately, the police knew about the situation here. They had prepared light sticks. After lighting them up, they threw them into the cellar. Although the light wasn't too bright, it was enough for us to see. This time, we didn't let Professor Liang take the lead. Han Wennan and I went to check first. After we confirmed that it was safe, we helped Professor Liang into the cellar. It had been more than a month since the incident, and the remains of the corpses had long been cleaned up. Even the blood in the blood pool that was not easily removed had dried up, forming a thick layer of blood stains at the bottom of the pool. It was dark red and very disgusting. Professor Liang looked around for a while and suddenly walked up to the blood pool. He didn't mind it at all. He laid down on the edge of the pool, bent over, and pressed his hand on the layer of blood stains. It seemed like he wanted to dip his hand in some blood stains to examine it. Who knew that when he pressed, the dark bottom of the pool was like a thin layer of paper, and he directly pressed a big hole. Professor Liang used too much force and lost his balance. He fell into the pond and into the black hole. No one had expected this sudden change. Standing behind him, I was the first to react. I reached out my hand to grab him. However, I missed him by a hair's breadth. Chapter 291. The atmosphere in the cellar was gloomy. With the addition of the thick, dried bloodstains, the atmosphere was terrifying enough. And now, something unimaginable had happened. Everybody stared at the dark hole that seemed to be connected to the Nether Palace. They couldn't help but feel scared. Even I felt a chill in my heart. Han Wennan, Chun Yangting, and the others were bold. Although this case was strange, they weren't too worried. After all, they had the Taoist energy to protect them. No matter what kind of monster they encountered, it was just a fight. However, I was different. Last time, Lu Chuanda had only met Yufuda. When he returned, he had broken the 8 trigrams mirror and the 4 divine talismans. It meant that this case wasn't just hiding something terrifying, but also a great power. So, what kind of danger was hidden in this black hole in the blood pond? Everybody kept silent. The first one to react was Professor Liang's student, Ling Duyu. This quiet boy with thick glasses anxiously ran to the blood pond. He threw his backpack aside and wanted to jump into the black hole to save his professor. Han Wennan and I hurriedly reached out to grab him, but Ling Duyu was very anxious. He kept struggling and shouting, "Teacher, he's so old. He must have been injured when he fell down. We have to save him quickly. Don't stop me. Let go of me." Muexian was calm. She also came to help. She pulled Ling Duyu and tried to persuade him. We have to save Professor Liang. However, we don't know the situation in the black hole. We don't know how deep it is, and we can't see anything inside. If we rush in, we will only make things worse. I tried my best to persuade this impulsive man. However, although he didn't want to go down there, he urged Han Wennan and me. He said anxiously, "Mr. Zhang, Mr. Han, I know you're all capable people. Professor is old, and he can't stand the torment. If we save him 1 minute earlier, we'll have more hope. Please, I'm begging you." Han Wennan, Chun Yangting, and Monk Miaojua didn't look happy. It wasn't because of what Ling Duyu had said. It was because we had used our Taoist energy to check the situation inside the black hole the moment Professor Liang had fallen. It was pitch black inside. Although we couldn't see far, our Taoist energy didn't hinder us. However, after checking, we found that there was some kind of power that prevented our Taoist energy from invading. Even so, our Taoist energy could still reach 20 to 30 meters. However, it hadn't reached the bottom of the black hole yet. This meant that Professor Liang had fallen to a height of at least 30 meters, which was the height of a 10-story building. Even a young man would die if he fell from such a height, let alone an old man like Professor Liang. Of course, nothing was absolute. If the bottom of the black hole was soft, or if there was enough water, Professor Liang would have been, but he would have died. In that case, although Professor Liang would still be seriously injured, he might still be able to keep his life. There was hope, but at this moment, no one was sure about the situation inside the black hole. In the end, Han Wennan stood up and pushed Ling Duyu aside. He asked the two policemen from the police station to restrain him. Then, he walked to the entrance of the black hole and used the stupidest but most effective method. He picked up a stone from the ground and threw it into the hole. If his Taoist energy couldn't reach the bottom, he would throw a stone to measure it. It was the most suitable method. However, to avoid hurting Professor Liang, Han Wennan didn't choose a big stone. He picked up a piece of soil that was smaller than his pinky and threw it into the hole. Then, he put his ear to the edge of the blood pond and listened carefully. 1 second, 2 seconds. Soon, 10 seconds had passed. Han Wennan and I changed our countenances again. We didn't hear anything for 10 seconds. We couldn't imagine how deep the black hole was. Even if Han Wennan and I knew it was safe, we wouldn't dare to go down this deep hole. Han Wennan stood up and didn't continue to listen. If we didn't hear anything for 10 seconds, even if the piece of soil touched the bottom of the hole, the sound wouldn't be able to reach us. After standing up, Han Wennan didn't hesitate anymore. He made a decision. Take care of Ling Duyu. We should return to the cellar and wait for further instructions. I've already reported it to our superiors. We'll wait for Chief Zhang to send us some tools. Then we'll decide what to do. We didn't have any objections. Although Professor Liang's two students weren't happy, Ling Duyu was under his control. Mu Xian was a weak girl. She opened her mouth anxiously, but she didn't know what to do. Tears welled up in her eyes. At this moment, Chen Yangting couldn't bear it anymore. He said, "How about you guys go up first? Little Xian and I will stay here and try to use the talisman technique to check the depth of this black hole." Chen Yangting's cultivation base wasn't weak. With him here, it wouldn't be a problem to ensure Mu Xian's safety. Moreover, Mount Longhu's talisman technique was exquisite. I didn't know what he could do. Han Wennan didn't say anything. He arranged for the others to go up first. I was the last to go up. Before I went up, I hesitated but didn't say anything in the end. Among the two major Taoist sects, the Chuanjin sect advocated getting rid of emotions and desires. They believed that only when one's heart was at peace could one return to simplicity and see one's nature. That was why the Taoist priests of this sect had to abstain from sexual desires. They couldn't get close to women, and they couldn't get married or have children. However, the Celestial Master sect was different. In the Jingyi sect, all the Taoist priests stayed at home. They could get married, have children, and live a family life. Usually, they could eat meat, and they could even wear common clothes. They didn't have beards, and their hairstyle was casual. Chen Yangting had taken the initiative to stay here to please Mu Xian, which didn't violate the Jingyi sect's teachings. However, Mu Xian and Ling Duyu were lovers, so Chen Yangting's behavior was despicable. Fortunately, we were all above the cellar, so we didn't need to worry about Chen Yangting's improper behavior. Moreover, Mu Xian and Ling Duyu weren't husband and wife. She wasn't married, and Chen Yangting, a male Taoist priest, wasn't married either. After leaving the cellar, we all sat at the entrance of the cellar. While waiting for the police's support, we paid attention to the situation down there. Around 20 minutes later, 3 police assault vehicles came to the orchard. More than 10 armed policemen got off the vehicles. The leader of the team was Deputy Chief Zhang, who was in charge of contacting us. Unlike our sad face, Deputy Chief Zhang looked excited. As soon as he saw us, he praised, "You're worthy of being the experts sent from the capital. We've been searching for a long time, but we haven't found any clues. You've only been here for 2 or 3 days, but you've already made such a big breakthrough. It's really admirable." While talking, he seemed to notice that the atmosphere wasn't right. His voice became softer, and he looked a little embarrassed. He hurried to say, "Of course, it's more important to save people. I brought a full set of search and rescue equipment, as well as a professional rescue team. We shouldn't delay any longer." We should go down there to save Professor Liang. Then he lifted his head and asked us, Master Han, Master Zhang, and Master Miaojia, I've heard that the black hole is very dangerous. If we want to go down there, we'll have to rely on you guys. I wonder if any of you would like to go with us? Monk Miaojia was a quiet man. I was afraid that Han Wenan and the others would recognize my accent, so I didn't want to talk unless necessary. Han Wenan had to make the decision. Let's go down and check the situation in the black hole first. Then, we'll make a decision. Chief Zhang nodded. He called more than 10 armed policemen who brought a lot of search and rescue equipment to follow us back to the cellar. The cellar was originally dark, but the rescue equipment Chief Zhang brought had a self-generated searchlight, which directly illuminated the inside of the cellar. When we went down, Qin Yangting and Mu Xian were still standing next to the blood pond. When they saw us, Qin Yangting didn't say anything, but Mu Xian said excitedly, Master Qin used a talisman to check the depth of the hole. Moreover, he found that there's water at the bottom. Professor Liang should be fine. After she finished talking, Qin Yangting smiled reservedly. That's right. I just checked. The hole is around 50 meters deep, and there's water at the bottom. Although Professor Liang isn't young, his body is still strong. Perhaps the worst-case scenario hasn't happened yet. Han Wenan and I frowned when we heard him. The piece of soil we'd thrown hadn't responded for 10 seconds. From a physics perspective, it was easy to calculate that in 10 seconds of free fall, the distance the piece of soil would fall should be more than 50 meters, even if the air resistance was taken into account. I didn't say anything, but Han Wenan asked, what method did Hall Master Qin use? Are you sure? Saving people is like putting out a fire. If you're sure, we don't need to check anymore. We can just go down and save him. His words were filled with suspicion, but Qin Yangting didn't mind. He smiled proudly and said, I'm a Taoist from Mount Longhu. Naturally, I used the talisman technique. Just now, I used a Ding Jia talisman to summon the Liuojia god to enter the hole to check for me. Although the black hole is magical and can block Taoist Qi, it can't block the Liuojia god. That's how I was able to see the situation inside. After he said that, Han Wenan and I understood at the same time. Sure enough, everyone had their own specialties. My research on talismans was profound, but I still couldn't compare to the master of talismans from Mount Longhu. In that situation, I didn't even think about using the god-inviting talisman. Of course, this was also related to the fact that I had just reached the glorious knowledge realm. The god-inviting talisman had to be at least a scarlet talisman. Up until now, I had only made one scarlet talisman. My understanding of scarlet talismans was naturally not as good as Qin Yangting's. Hearing his explanation, Han Wenan didn't hesitate anymore. He turned to Chief Zhang and said, Sage Chun is the hall master of Mount Longhu's Celestial Master Mansion's Xian Altar Hall. The situation that he found couldn't be fake. Chief Zhang, please prepare the equipment. We'll have a discussion here. We'll pick the person to enter the hole later. Chief Zhang received the order and left. Han Wenan turned to ask us who was willing to enter the hole together. Qin Yangting had just revealed his face, so he was proud of himself. Without hesitation, he said his name. Monk Miao Ju, who had been silent all this time, chanted the name of Buddha. Since this poor monk was sent here, I naturally have something to do. When Han Wenan's gaze shifted to me, I said bluntly, the dangers at the bottom of the hole are unknown. Why don't we go down together? There's strength in numbers, and we can take care of each other. In order to rescue Lu Chuanda, I had to get to the bottom of this case. Moreover, ever since I found the mystic bird in the G cauldron in the mural, I became very interested in this case. No matter what, I had to make this trip. Since I had to go down, I naturally had to bring all of them with me to be safe. Han Wenan pondered for a moment, then agreed to my suggestion. Chapter 292. After seeing this, my face didn't change. I looked at Han Wenan and the others, who were quietly sliding down the rope. They didn't pay attention to the situation behind us. Then, I began to use my witchcraft energy. Although the green mist looked like witchcraft energy, It was very dangerous in this place. I had to be careful and didn't directly absorb it. I used my witchcraft energy to wrap the green mist in front of me before absorbing it into my body. After the green mist circulated through my body, it entered the veins of the heavens and flowed into the witch chi source stone. I smiled. Since the witch chi source stone could absorb the green mist, it must be witchcraft energy. I couldn't restrain my excitement. Since I couldn't cultivate witchcraft energy, I had to absorb it from the outside world. That was why I wanted to go to Thailand. Who would have thought that I would find traces of witchcraft energy there? I couldn't help but think. The Tai Sui was born from the 4 Sui stars, so there should be 4 Tai Sui. Up until now, I knew that the Tai Sui existed in Shaojin, the Corpsine sect, and the royal palace of Thailand. Was there a 4th Tai Sui in this mysterious black hole? It was too much of a coincidence. While I was thinking about this, I subconsciously slowed down. Chen Yangting, who was in front of me, quickly noticed the situation. He turned his head and called out to me in a low voice. Hey, I finally reacted. I put my doubts aside and sped up to catch up with them. Chen Yangting wasn't wrong. This mysterious cave wasn't even 50 meters deep. When I caught up with them, Han Wenan had reached the bottom of the cave. She waved the searchlight in her hand, signaling us to follow her. For safety's sake, the 4 of us didn't come down with the same rope. Instead, each of us had a separate rope attached to our bodies. After Han Wenan sent the signal, the 3 of us moved away from each other and continued to descend parallel to Han Wenan. At this moment, the light from the 4 searchlights illuminated the bottom of the cave. Right below us was the water that Chen Yangting had mentioned. Moreover, the color was deep and not shallow. However, the surface of the water was sparkling. Besides the water, there was nothing else. Professor Liang wasn't here. Chen Yangting was about to speak when Han Wenan reached out and stopped him. She moved the searchlight in her hand away from the water and shone it parallel to her body. She lowered her voice and said, "Look, we had been paying attention to the water, so when we looked around, we were startled. We didn't know when, but we were no longer surrounded by walls. Instead, we were surrounded by an open space. However, our attention was focused on the water below us, so we didn't notice the change. Although the light from the searchlights was bright, it was because the lights were gathered together, so the space they illuminated was extremely limited. They could only see where the light was shining, and the surroundings seemed even darker. After Han Wenan finished speaking, he reached into his backpack and took out a few light sticks. After lighting them up, he threw them into the water below. The deep and serene water at the bottom of the cave did not seem to have anything special about it. The glow stick floated above it, and a gentle light quickly shone out. Han Wenan asked us to turn off the searchlight. After turning off the light, we all closed our eyes. After our eyes gradually got used to the darkness in front of us, we opened our eyes and looked around. The light from the glow stick wasn't strong, but it lit up an extremely wide space. The 4 of us had the cultivation of glory of consciousness realm, so our vision was much stronger than normal people. At that moment, the situation at the bottom of the cave was completely revealed to us. The bottom of the cave was an extremely open space. There was a circular hole about 2 meters above our heads, extending all the way to the ground. This was the black hole that we had come down from. Below the black hole, which was where we were currently standing, was a square stone platform about 10 meters long. At the center of the stone platform was a round thing that looked like a well. It was about twice the size of the cave above us. The rim of the well was completely made of stone, and the surface was smooth and smooth. It looked very exquisite, and the well was filled with water, which was level with the rim. The water that we saw was just the water in the well. Chen Yangting, who was beside me, was the first to speak. He cursed softly. "Damn it, I only detected that there was water below. I didn't think that there would be another world below. However, don't you think that the appearance of the square platform and the well is very strange? This is clearly a man-made structure. Could it be that there's a tomb below, and the hole that we came down from was a robber's hole?" Han Wenan shook his head and said in a muffled voice, "It doesn't look like a tomb. I can't be sure either. Our first mission is to save Professor Liang. Let's not care about that for now. Let's go down to the well and check if Professor Liang sank into the water or if he left the water and went somewhere else. After he said that, his body exerted force in midair, and with a sudden swing, he glided to the side of the well. He stepped on the edge of the well and used the momentum to land on the platform beside the well. The remaining three of us also followed suit, and soon all landed on the ground. After untying the rope, Han Wan-an tried the walkie-talkie on him and realized that it couldn't be used at all. Thus, he found a pen and paper and wrote down the situation below. Then, he tied the paper to his rope and pulled the rope and shook it a few times. This was the signal that we had agreed on for the people above to pull the rope when we came down. After he finished shaking the rope, his rope was quickly pulled up. After sending the message, Han Wan-an went to the side of the well and carefully looked at the water in the mouth of the well, trying to find any signs of Professor Liang's activities. Chun Yangting, who was next to him, said, "Don't waste your time. Look at the light stick. Since it can float on the water, it proves that the buoyancy of the water is normal. If Professor Liang is in the water, whether he's dead or alive, he will eventually float to the surface. Now that there's no one on the surface, he must have climbed out of the water and gone somewhere else. It's better for us to look for him directly." Han Wan-an ignored him and turned on the searchlight in his hand. After carefully searching around the well for a long time, he pointed at a spot on the edge of the well and said, "There are footprints here. Professor Liang did climb out of the water." We moved closer to take a look. Sure enough, there was a very faint water stain. It looked like a blurry footprint. Chun Yangting snorted. "Didn't I just say that? Why do you have to do this?" His words weren't friendly, but Han Wan-an didn't mind. He stood next to the water stain and pointed in the direction of the footprint. He said, "This place is very spacious, and we can't see anything in the dark. If Professor Liang climbed out of here, he must have traveled in a straight line. If we continue to search along this line, we will surely find other clues." Chun Yangting was stunned and didn't say anything else. Han Wan-an followed the straight line and continued to move forward. As he walked, he used the searchlight to carefully check the traces on the ground. I smiled faintly and followed along with Monk Miaojue. Chun Yangting seemed to feel that he had lost face, so he waited for a while before following us. When he came over, we were already next to the square platform. This platform was around 1 meter high. Han Wan-an didn't directly jump down. Instead, he used the searchlight to search around the edge of the platform. He found a small pile of wet mud on the edge. He nodded and said, "It should be right. Professor Liang did come down from this direction. Let's continue to search." This time, he didn't need to explain as we understood. The orchard above the cellar was full of sand. Although it wasn't raining and the soles of our shoes wouldn't get muddy, there would always be some sand. Professor Liang had fallen into the pond, and the sand had formed a thin layer of mud on the soles of his shoes. It might not have left any traces when he walked, but when he jumped down from the platform, he was too old to jump down like us. His shoes would have scraped the edge of the platform, and this pile of mud was scraped off at that time and left here. Although the theory was simple, Han Wan-an had started to search for clues along the edge of the well as soon as he came down. It was clear that he had anticipated these clues. His meticulous mind wasn't simple at all. I turned to look at him. This guy looked simple, but he was actually very smart. During the Young Phoenix gathering, his talent had been completely suppressed by the prodigies of the same generation. In the competition before advancing to glory of knowledge, he had lost to Zhang Kunlun. It seemed as though he had been left behind by the other prodigies. But in reality, I had a strange feeling that this guy, who used to be the top of the young generation, might still be the top of the young generation. At the very least, it had only been 2 months since my shaman energy advanced to glory of knowledge, and I met him again. Back then, Yi Piampian had said that with her talent, she had used 3 months to absorb the obsidian stone. However, Han Wan-an had used 2 months at most. Maybe his talent wasn't that strong, but his cultivation foundation, comprehension, and hard work weren't ordinary. His final achievement wouldn't be bad. The light stick illuminated a wide range, but the distance it illuminated wasn't very far. After jumping off the platform, we turned on our searchlights again and continued to walk forward. The cave space was unimaginably large. We walked for a full 10 minutes before we finally saw a mountain wall in front of us. Under the light from the searchlights, we could clearly see that there were two caves on the mountain wall in front of us. The cave on the left was extremely large, and the entrance was 3 to 4 meters high. The cave on the right was much smaller, and the entrance wasn't even as tall as a person. I didn't find any traces left behind by Professor Liang along the way, nor did I find his body or body. If I wasn't wrong, he should have followed this direction and entered the cave. The question now was, which cave did he enter? We walked to the side of the mountain wall. This time, we didn't wait for Han Wenan to speak before we started to search the two cave entrances. The entire cave was very dry, and the ground was made of flat rocks. There wasn't any dust, so it was impossible for footprints to be left behind. Thus, we mainly searched for traces on the mountain walls of the cave entrances. Professor Liang had fallen accidentally, so it was impossible that he hadn't thought that someone would come down to rescue him. If he had walked forward, he would have definitely left behind some traces. Following this logic, we soon found something. This time, Chen Yangting was the one who found the clue. He pointed at the mountain wall of the cave entrance on the left and said excitedly, "There's a mark here. It must have been left by Professor Liang." We moved closer to take a look. There was indeed a football-sized symbol that looked like the word big. However, there was an extra horizontal line below it, which connected the bottom of the word. Han Wenan nodded and said, "It should be this cave." This time, he didn't disagree. Chen Yangting was very excited, and he was about to walk into the cave when Han Wenan stopped him. He used the searchlight in his hand to illuminate the cave. Then he said, "We haven't figured out the situation in this cave yet, so it's not a good time to move forward. How about we go back first and ask the armed police to bring some large lighting equipment here? Then we can continue our investigation." He was an experienced man, and Chen Yangting wasn't happy about it. He said nonchalantly, "It's just a tomb or an ancient ruin. What's there that we can't figure out? Moreover, we've been walking for half a day. The path in front of us is suitable for walking, but the path behind us isn't. What kind of logic is that? In my opinion, Professor Liang's body won't be able to hold on for long. We should hurry and find someone to help us." Han Wenan shook his head. The inside of the cave is different from the outside. The outside is spacious, and even if we encounter any danger, we could detect it in advance. The inside of the cave is narrow, and if we encounter any danger, not only will it be hard to detect it, but it will also be hard to hide from it. Since Professor Liang could walk this far, his body shouldn't be in danger. We should be more cautious. The two of them argued, but Miao Ju remained silent. He stood next to them and didn't try to mediate. At this moment, my eyes moved away from the symbol. I hesitated for a while before interrupting their argument. "Don't you think it's strange? Why is this symbol so big?" Chen Yangting was getting impatient. When he heard my question, he curled his lips. "It's just a symbol. What's the difference in size?" Han Wenan didn't argue with him this time. He agreed with him and said, "Perhaps Professor Liang was afraid that we wouldn't be able to see it, so he did it on purpose." I hesitated, but I didn't say anything else. Then, Han Wenan and Chen Yangting's argument came to an end. Han Wenan agreed to enter the cave. However, before entering, he had to inform the people on the ground that there wasn't any danger in this place. He had to ask them to send some people to bring some lighting equipment as backup. Chen Yangting was a man of his own will, so he naturally agreed. After Han Wenan was done, he led us into the cave. After the three of them had entered the cave, I hesitated for a while at the entrance. In the end, I followed them. I hesitated because I knew there was something wrong with the symbol on the mountain wall. Of course, it wasn't because the symbol was too big, but because I could sense a thick aura of witchcraft energy coming from it. Chapter 293. I wanted to remind them, but I didn't know how to explain it to them. That was why I pretended to say that the symbol was too big. Unfortunately, this excuse didn't hold water, and they easily refuted me. As for why I was willing to go in with them, it was my selfishness. Ever since I discovered the witchcraft aura in the tunnel, I've been secretly thinking about it. After I came down, I've been searching for signs of witchcraft aura. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any signs of witchcraft aura in this spacious cave until I found this symbol. If I wasn't mistaken, the mass of witchcraft energy we had seen earlier must have come from this cave. Although I had come here to investigate a case, the witchcraft energy was more important to me than this case. Since I couldn't stop them, I decided to follow them and go into this cave. No matter if we could find the witchcraft energy or not, we would be safer with them around. As for Professor Liang, Han Wenan was right. If he could walk this far, it meant that his body wasn't injured. Moreover, we had notified the higher-ups. When they came down with the lighting equipment, they would search in other places. Whether he could be saved or not depended on his luck. Speaking of which, Professor Liang was a bold man. After he fell, he didn't stay put and wait for help. Instead, he wanted to run around. I didn't know what he was thinking. Anyway, after we entered the cave, we found that although the cave was big, it was much narrower than the spacious space outside. The light from the 4 searchlights made the surroundings look bright. Unlike the open space outside, as soon as we entered the cave, we saw a tree stump on both sides of the road. Every 2 meters, there was a crisscross tree stump sticking out of the wall. Han Wenan, the leader of the group, shone the searchlight in his hand. Now, we could see that it wasn't a tree stump. It was 2 rows of round stones on the wall. Moreover, they had some rough carvings. This underground cave was strange and mysterious, and we had come here in a hurry. We didn't have any clues. Now that we saw these man-made carvings, of course, we couldn't let them go. It was a pity that Professor Liang wasn't here. Although the 4 of us knew a little about ancient culture, we were all dabblers. Han Wenan squatted down, stretched out her hand, and knocked on the stone twice. She said, "This is made of mud. From the carvings on it, it looks like a doll." Since I was the furthest away from them, I noticed that the top of these circular objects was slightly concave, dividing them into 2 halves. From the carvings on the shorter part, I could tell that they were indeed puppets. Han Wenan said that the doll was made of mud, so it must be a terracotta figure. It was said that in ancient times, there were many terracotta warriors buried with them. The most famous one was Ing Zheng, the Emperor of Qin. There were tens of thousands of terracotta soldiers buried with the Qin Emperor's tomb. After excavating them, they were hailed as rare treasures. Before I could open my mouth, Chen Yangting said, "Is this really a tomb? There are so many terracotta warriors buried with them. Maybe we've stumbled upon the tomb of an important figure in ancient times." Han Wenan shook his head. The ancients believed that the world after death was the same as when they were alive. That's why they made terracotta warriors to be buried with them. Their purpose was to protect and serve the tomb owner. For example, the terracotta warriors of the Qin Emperor's tomb were placed around it. They were equipped with chariots and armor. If this place is really a tomb, no matter if it's for protection or service, the dolls should be standing on both sides of the road. However, these terracotta warriors are stuck in the wall, with only half of their bodies exposed. What's the meaning of this? Since these dolls were strange, Chen Yangting didn't refute. He just reached out to touch them. He didn't know the reason either. After studying for a while, Han Wenan finally got up and said, "We should find Professor Liang first. We should record the situation of these dolls. When we get out of here, we will give them to the archaeologists to study." Since we couldn't understand them, we didn't have any objections. We stood up and followed Han Wenan. The tunnel in this cave was really long. Since we knew the situation here, we didn't dare to rush. We walked slowly. After walking for half an hour, we still hadn't reached the exit. Chen Yangting was the first one to lose his cool. He waved the searchlight in his hand and shone it around. He said angrily, "We've been walking for half an hour. Besides the terracotta warriors on both sides of the road, there's nothing else. We don't need to be so careful. I think we should move faster." Although Professor Liang is old, he was able to run this far even after falling. His body isn't bad. If he isn't slower than us, and this cave is really long, how long will it take us to find him? Han Wenan suddenly stopped. He thought for a while and answered, "You're right." Professor Liang fell suddenly, but he was able to run this far. His body isn't bad. However, he doesn't have a searchlight in his hand. Even if he has a light source on his phone, he won't be able to catch up with us in the dark. It's been less than an hour since he fell. We've been walking for a long time, but we still haven't caught up with him. Did something happen? Then, he didn't wait for Chun Yangting's reply. He turned to us and asked, along the way, "Did you pay attention to the surrounding mountain walls? Could it be that there was a fork in the road and we missed it?" Chun Yangting was surprised. "I've been paying attention to the surrounding mountain walls. There shouldn't be a fork in the road." He sounded very guilty. It was obvious that he hadn't paid much attention to the road. Miao Ju, who was standing next to him, was honest. He said, "This poor monk only cared about the road. Although I did pay attention to the surrounding mountain walls, it was just a cursory glance. If there was a hidden fork in the road, I'm afraid we missed it." After Miao Ju said that, Han Wennian turned to me. The three of them had come together from the capital, so they knew each other's cultivation base. As for me, I had been forced to join the group by the leader of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. I had never revealed my cultivation base, and had always played the role of a follower. I thought that Han Wennian wouldn't care about my opinion, so I didn't plan to answer him. However, since he had asked, I smiled and said, "Chen Daozhong is right. I've been paying attention to the surroundings along the way, but I haven't found any forks in the road." It wasn't that I was talking nonsense, but that I had been paying attention to the surroundings along the way. Ever since I had discovered the aura of shaman energy from the symbol at the entrance, I had come here to search for shaman energy. Moreover, I was at the back of the group, so I didn't need to worry about the road ahead. I just needed to follow them. That was why I had been paying attention to the surroundings along the way. After asking about the situation, Han Wennian was silent for half a minute. Then, he made a decision and said, "We'll continue to search for another half an hour. If we still don't find anything, we'll go back the way we came. We'll carefully search the mountain walls along the way. If we can't find anything, we'll go back and meet up with the people from the Municipal Public Security Bureau. After we've made sufficient preparations, we'll continue to search. What do you think?" Miao Ju didn't have any objections. Chun Yangting was already impatient, so he nodded. Although I wanted to continue searching until I found the shaman energy or the Tai Sui, I couldn't reveal my purpose to them, so I nodded in agreement. After the agreement was made, we continued to move forward. It seemed that Han Wennian's worries weren't wrong. The rest of the way was the same as the way we had come. If it weren't for the fact that our cultivation base wasn't bad, and we could clearly sense the subtle differences between the mountain walls and the terracotta figures, I would have suspected that we had run into a ghost wall. After walking for another 20 minutes, I became more and more impatient. All of a sudden, I was shaken. My eyes moved from a mountain wall to the terracotta figures stuck in the wall. I had seen so many terracotta figures along the way, and I was already tired of looking at them. Of course, I wasn't interested in them anymore. The reason why I was attracted to this terracotta figure was that I had finally found the traces of shaman energy on this terracotta figure. I hesitated. Although Han Wennian had told me that we wouldn't find Professor Liang this time, and that we would come back later to search, I didn't want to miss the traces of shaman energy that I had just found. Moreover, this terracotta figure was different from the mist of shaman energy and the symbol at the entrance of the cave. The mist and the symbol could be seen at first glance, so they didn't have any research value. However, this terracotta figure was huge. Perhaps there were a lot of shaman energy beads sealed inside. Since I had found it, I didn't want to miss it. Thus, after a moment of hesitation, I stopped. The three people in front of me had high cultivation bases. They immediately noticed my action and turned around. Han Wennian didn't doubt my action. He hurriedly asked, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, did you find something?" I stared at the terracotta figure and shook my head. I didn't find anything. However, I suddenly thought of something. Although there aren't any forks along the way, there are so many terracotta figures on the mountain wall. Could there be some secret passage? Or the places where the terracotta figures are poking are actually passages that are blocked by the terracotta figures? If that's the case, it's possible that Professor Liang found a passage while studying the terracotta figures and got in. I remembered reading a saying somewhere. As long as you're willing to lie, there will always be people willing to believe you. This was not to say that there were many fools in the world, but because everything in the world had countless possibilities, especially when faced with some unknown things. No one knew anything. So, as long as you put forward your own opinion, most people would accept it for the time being. Han Wennan and the others weren't an exception. When they heard my story, their eyes brightened. They hurried to follow me to the terracotta figure that was emitting waves of shaman energy. Qin Yangting was impatient. He didn't wait for me to take action and directly reached out to pull the terracotta figure. Unfortunately, the terracotta figure was several times thicker than a human. It wasn't light, and it was completely glued to the mountain wall. Although cultivators had extraordinary strength, they weren't superhumans. He pulled for a long time, but the terracotta figure didn't budge. Qin Yangting was annoyed. He took out a talisman and raised his hand to throw it at the place where the terracotta figure was connected to the mountain wall. He wanted to use the talisman's power to pull the terracotta figure out. Han Wennan and Monk Miaojue hurried to pull him back. Han Wennan advised, "We don't know the situation here. Don't use the talisman rashly. If we're in a graveyard, there will inevitably be hidden weapons. If you use the talisman rashly, I'm afraid you'll trigger those things." His words were solemn, but we hadn't found anything yet. I didn't want to miss out on this terracotta figure, so I urged him. Daozhang Chun is from Mount Longhu, and he's an expert in the art of talismans. He's just trying to make this terracotta figure, so he won't trigger any other traps. Of course, if this terracotta figure is a hidden weapon or a hidden weapon, it'll be better. We've been looking for it for a long time, but we haven't found anything. Perhaps we'll find some new clues after triggering the traps. As for fellow Taoist Han's worries, they're groundless. The traps in a graveyard are nothing more than flying arrows and stones, but look around. It's just a cave. Even if there are hidden weapons or traps, they won't be very powerful. With our abilities, we can easily avoid them. Qin Yangting didn't get along with Han Wennan, so he agreed with my suggestion. Monk Miaojue didn't have any ideas, and now Han Wennan was all alone. He hesitated for a moment, then clenched his teeth and agreed with us. We retreated to the side for the time being. Qin Yangting excitedly took out another talisman and threw it at the place where the terracotta figure was connected to the mountain wall. The corners of my mouth twitched as I watched. Chapter 294. The Yin and Yang talisman was a yellow talisman. It didn't have much power, and its principle was simple. It used Tao energy to divide Yin and Yang. It was the upgraded version of the Burning Yang talisman and the Gathering Yin talisman. Its effect was somewhat similar to the Yin-Yang Yama brush. However, a small talisman couldn't balance the Yin and Yang energies. Thus, the Yin and Yang energies would mix and react violently. To put simply, it would explode. The talisman Qin Yangting had thrown at the figurine was a Yin and Yang talisman. When it touched the wall, the Yin and Yang energies mixed together, creating a deep, muffled explosion. A deep hole appeared on the hard wall. The figurine that was stuck in the wall tilted a lot after the explosion. Apparently, it was loose now. I guess we could pull it out if we went there. However, at this moment, no one laid their eyes on the figurine. Everyone, including Qin Yangting, was paying attention to the surroundings. Just like I had said, using the talisman to take the figurine down wasn't just to get the figurine. It was also to alert the enemy. The Yin and Yang talisman's explosion wasn't small. If there was a hidden danger in this cave, such a big commotion would likely trigger it. I took out the silver talisman that Mr. Lee had given me. My body was tense, and I was ready to take action at any moment. Although my goal was the spirit energy inside the figurine, I knew how dangerous this place was compared to Han Wennan and the others. I didn't dare to relax. After half a minute, the cave was still as silent as before. The danger we had imagined didn't come. Everyone's vigilant faces relaxed, and I exhaled in relief. When I was about to walk to Chun Yangting's side, I heard the sound of something heavy falling to the ground. Han went in and I stopped walking. Our hearts were hanging in suspense. We cautiously turned to look at the source of the noise. It was the broken terracotta statue next to Chun Yangting's feet. It had slid to the ground. The noise was the sound of the terracotta statue hitting the stone floor. The terracotta statue was right next to Chun Yangting's feet. Of course, he wasn't scared. He stooped to check the statue. When we walked toward it, he seemed to find something. He stood up and waved at us excitedly. "Hurry! Come here!" Han Wen'an and I were roused. We hurried to the statue. Chun Yangting pointed at the end where the terracotta statue was connected to the mountain wall. He said excitedly, "Look, what's that thing under the feet of the terracotta statue?" He didn't need to say anything as Han Wen'an and I were already attracted by it. The bottom of the figurine, which was the bottom part of the mountain wall, was connected to something as thick as a person's wrist. It looked like a rusty iron pipe. It was dark and looked really tough. One side was connected to the figurine, and the other side was still connected to the deep hole left by the figurine when it slid out. Chun Yangting didn't know what it was. Of course, Han Wen'an and I didn't know either. When we were about to squat down to check, Chun Yangting didn't care if it was dangerous or not. He directly grabbed the thing. Although he was bold, he wasn't reckless. When he grabbed the thing, his hand was covered with a layer of Tao energy. That was why his hand didn't touch the thing. Han Wen'an wanted to stop him, but she didn't say anything. After Chun Yangting grabbed it, he pulled it up. It looked like an iron pipe. However, as Chun Yangting moved, it changed its shape. Apparently, it was very soft. It's strange. This thing is so soft. I don't think it's a tree root. Could it be an animal? A snake? Cultivators weren't afraid of snakes or insects. Chun Yangting said as he used both hands to grab the thing. He tried to pull it out a few times. However, the thing was buried deep in the mountain wall. He tried to pull it a few times, but it didn't budge an inch. Seeing that there was no danger, Han Wen'an squatted down and reached out to press the thing. He studied it for a long time, but he didn't find anything. However, he wasn't as curious as Chun Yangting. After pressing it a few times, he put it aside for the time being. He stuck his head out to look at the hole in the mountain wall and said what Daoist Zhang said just now is correct. After this puppet was made, there was indeed a deep hole in the mountain wall. Wait a moment, I'll go in and take a look. Han Wen'an had a strong body. Although the hole in the mountain wall was big, it wasn't suitable for him to get in. Chun Yangting and I were more suitable. However, I guess he couldn't order Chun Yangting around, and he didn't have confidence in my abilities. Thus, he didn't discuss it with us and directly got in. I had just made up an excuse. I didn't expect that the hole was really deep. Han Wen'an got in and disappeared. I had a good impression of Han Wen'an. When I saw him get in, I was worried about his safety. I hurried to the side and listened to the commotion inside. Less than a minute later, Han Wen'an came back. Without waiting for us to ask, he said, "It's just a small cave. Besides this thing that's connected to the wall, there's nothing else." I tried to pull it a few times, but the mountain wall was really hard, and this thing was connected to the wall. I couldn't pull it out. I nodded and said, "If that's the case, even if Professor Liang got into this kind of cave, he wouldn't be able to go anywhere else. Daoist Han, what should we do next?" After all, I was just making things up, and I didn't expect it to be true. Now that my speculation was proven wrong, I had to ask Han Wen'an for his opinion on what to do next. He thought for a while, then nodded. "You're right. These dolls look the same, and the hidden cave behind them should be similar. It's impossible for Professor Liang to go somewhere else. We've set a time limit of half an hour. Although it's already passed, we've only moved forward for around 20 minutes. We'll walk for another 10 minutes and pay attention to the terracotta statues along the way. If we don't find anything, we'll go back. On the way back, we'll check again to see if we missed anything. What do you think?" Chun Yangting wasn't interested. I hadn't figured out why these terracotta statues had witchcraft energy, and I didn't want to move forward. Of course, I had no objection. Then, we continued our journey. The rest of the journey wasn't any different from the previous one. We carefully checked all the terracotta figures on the mountain wall. None of them had loosened. However, not long after, I found another terracotta figure that contained shaman energy. This time, I didn't try to take it out. The previous one was enough. As we continued to walk, more terracotta statues with witchcraft energy appeared. Moreover, their density seemed to be increasing. Every few terracotta statues emitted waves of witchcraft energy. I guessed, and I became excited. Although I didn't know why the terracotta statues had witchcraft energy, this situation proved that there was a place with a large amount of witchcraft energy in front of us. It was possible that the Tai Sui was there. Unfortunately, after 10 minutes, the path and terracotta statues in front of us were still endless. We couldn't see the end of them. This time, we wouldn't be able to find Tai Sui. After we stopped, Chen Yangting said, "All right, it's time. Let's go back." Then, he turned around to leave. Miao Ju and I also turned to follow him. However, Han Wenan stood there strangely. He said to us, "Guys, please wait a moment." We turned to look at him. He was using the searchlight to illuminate the passage in the distance. His brows were furrowed. It seemed he was thinking about something. We didn't know what he wanted to do, so we had to stop for now. Before we could ask, Han Wenan turned to me and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, can you sense the aura in front of us?" I was stunned. It was the first time that he had taken the initiative to ask me about anything besides the previous time when he had asked me if I had discovered anything on the way here. I didn't know what he meant, but I didn't refuse him. I closed my eyes and focused on sensing. The first thing I sensed in front of us was the aura of witchcraft energy. However, Han Wenan and the others couldn't sense it, and they couldn't be talking about it. I avoided the aura of witchcraft energy and continued to sense. Half a minute later, I opened my eyes in astonishment. My face was full of disbelief. Han Wenan hurried to ask, "Did you sense it too?" I turned to look at him. My face was still filled with disbelief. After a long time, I nodded and said, "There seems to be a—" Before I could finish, Han Wenan suddenly interrupted me. "That's right. There seems to be a dangerous aura in front of us. We can't go any further. We must go back immediately." I was surprised again, but I immediately understood what Han Wenan meant. I looked at Han Wenan's face again and nodded. "We should go back." Han Wenan didn't say anything. He lifted his feet and strode back to the road. Chen Yangting and Miao Ju didn't suspect anything and immediately followed behind him. After they left, I raised the corner of my mouth. Han Wenan was quite interesting. The reason why I had an incredulous expression was because I had sensed the aura of a dragon vein in front of us. This was a cave. Although it was underground, as long as it was a cave, it proved that we were in a mountain range. It wasn't strange to have the aura of a dragon vein. However, what was strange was that the aura of a dragon vein contained a wisp of true dragon's aura. An ordinary dragon vein wouldn't have true dragon's aura. Only a true dragon vein would have true dragon's aura. Moreover, it could only be sensed in a place very close to a true dragon vein. In other words, there was a true dragon vein not far away from us. Han Wenan had asked me to sense it because he wasn't too confident and wanted me to confirm it. Although monk Miao Jue and Chen Yangting also cultivated Taoist Qi, their understanding of dragon veins and true dragon veins was far inferior to that of feng shui. As for why he had interrupted me, his purpose was even more obvious. The true dragon vein was a precious treasure. He naturally didn't want Miao Jue and Chen Yangting to know about it. I didn't really care about the true dragon vein, so I was happy to do him a favor. However, I showed an incredulous expression not because of the true dragon vein, but because I had sensed the shaman aura and guessed that the Tai Sui was in front of us. Why was there a true dragon vein? Could it be that the Tai Sui was hiding in front of us and that there was a true dragon vein? Chapter 295. We had already inspected the terracotta warriors on the way here, so we walked very quickly on the way back. In a short while, we arrived at the terracotta warrior that I had first discovered contained shaman chi. The terracotta warrior had already been blasted out by Chen Yangting's talismans. There was no reason not to take it out. I said that this thing had research value. If we took it out to study it, it would definitely be useful for our next operation. Han Wennan, Chun Yangting, and the others did not think much and immediately nodded in agreement. The terracotta warrior was not very heavy, weighing no more than 50 pounds. For cultivators, it was naturally not a problem. I volunteered to carry the terracotta warrior, so naturally, no one fought me for this difficult task. However, before carrying it out, there was another problem. It was the tube-like thing at the tail of the terracotta warrior. One end of this tube-shaped object was deeply buried in the mountain wall and could not be pulled out at all. The other end was completely connected to the terracotta figurines and could not be pulled out. Therefore, there was no need to think too much about it. The only way was to cut it off. Han Wennan used his palm as a knife, and with chi of the way stored within, he viciously chopped down with his palm. He had the cultivation of the glory of consciousness realm. Although it was only a pair of flesh palms, under the effect of chi of the way, they were much sharper than ordinary knives and swords. It was a pity that after he chopped down with his palm, the situation that he had imagined did not occur. Only an extremely deep dent appeared on the tube-like thing. Han Wennan made a sound of surprise. Clearly, the toughness of this thing had exceeded his expectations. If flesh palms could not cut it, then a sharp blade had to be used. Of the 4 people here, only I carried a green-hilt sword. However, I was still worried about danger and did not attack. Instead, I took down the green-hilt sword and threw it to Han Wennan. After receiving the sword, Han Wennan did not hesitate. He gripped the hilt of the sword, and a white light swept down. This time, there was no more suspense. The tube-like thing was cut in half. However, at this moment, something strange happened. The part of the broken tube-like thing connected to the terracotta warrior did not move, but the part connected to the mountain wall trembled violently. In an instant, it shrank back into the mountain wall and disappeared. Although it looked like a snake, we had been fiddling with it for a long time, but we didn't find any movement. We didn't expect it to be a living creature. The 4 of them stared at it dumbfoundedly for a long time. Han Wennan's expression turned solemn as he said, "This thing is actually alive. It's connected to the terracotta figurines and hidden deep in the mountain wall. It's definitely not an ordinary thing." Fortunately, fellow Taoist Zhang was meticulous and thought of digging out the terracotta figurines to take a look. Otherwise, we definitely wouldn't have found this clue. I blushed. Fortunately, I was hidden in the dark and no one could see me. How am I meticulous? What I said just now was purely nonsense. I didn't expect to stumble upon a clue by accident. We didn't stop for long. I picked up the terracotta figurines, and the 4 of us went back the way we had come. However, we had to check each of the terracotta figurines for any abnormalities. That was why we walked much slower than when we came. Halfway through the journey, I suddenly heard someone breathing in front of us. I was bewildered. Han Wennan and the other 2 didn't have ordinary cultivation bases. Even I didn't feel tired after carrying the terracotta figurines for such a long time. How could they be panting? While I was puzzled, the panting became more rapid. The people in front of us also noticed the abnormality. Han Wennan suddenly stopped and asked, "Fellow Taoist Chun, are you okay? Are you not feeling well?" Now that he mentioned it, I knew that Qin Yangting was the one who had panted. I pondered for a moment and put the terracotta figurines on the ground with a serious face. After Han Wennan asked, Qin Yangting's panting didn't stop. Instead, it became more and more intense. Moreover, he didn't pay attention to Han Wennan. He didn't turn his head and continued to walk forward. Han Wennan was a little anxious. He quickly walked forward and put his hand on his shoulder. Before he could say anything, Qin Yangting suddenly turned around, his dark eyes gazing at Han Wennan. I used the searchlight in my hand to look at him. When I saw Qin Yangting's eyes, my heart sank. Strangely, only the whites of his eyes were left. Moreover, they were bloodshot. Eyeballs had a lot of blood vessels, and it was normal to see them when the eyeballs were congested. However, the blood vessels on Qin Yangting's eyeballs looked like wriggling earthworms. They bulged from his eyeballs and wiggled unceasingly. It looked terrifying, as if they could explode at any moment. After a moment of shock, Han Wennan obviously realized that something was wrong. He quickly withdrew his hands from Chun Yangting's shoulders and retreated rapidly. But it was obviously too late. Chun Yangting suddenly raised his hands and grabbed both sides of Han Wennan's shoulders, forcing him to be unable to retreat. Then, he tightened his grip on Han Wennan's neck. Chun Yangting exerted a lot of strength. In just a blink of an eye, Han Wennan's face turned red. However, he was an easy person to deal with. He quickly took out a talisman and pressed it on Chun Yangting's chest. I could see that Han Wennan was still holding back. The talisman he took out was just a burning sun talisman. He wanted to force Chun Yangting to loosen his grip. However, Chun Yangting was crazy. He ignored the burning sun talisman and didn't loosen his grip. In just a blink of an eye, a fireball appeared between the two of them, burning the clothes on their chests. Feng Shui masters were strong, but their bodies weren't much stronger than ordinary people. After the fireball subsided, their chests were dyed red and black. The black was the burned skin, and the red was the blood that oozed out. This time, Han Wennan was enraged. He didn't hold back anymore. He turned his wrist and took out the leaf-type magic tool that I'd seen many times. This magic tool of his had improved. When it enlarged, it split into two leaves, coiling around Chun Yangting's arms. Then I heard some cracking sounds. Chun Yangting's arms were broken. He couldn't use his wrists anymore, and they fell from Han Wennan's neck. Han Wennan retrieved his leaf-type magic tool. He lifted his foot and kicked Chun Yangting, sending him flying far away. Then he stood there, gasping for breath. After catching his breath, he quickly turned around and beckoned Miao, Zhu, and me to come over. He said hastily, "There's something strange in this cave. Chun Yangting must have accidentally provoked some evil creature. Let's work together to subdue him first." As soon as he finished talking, Chun Yangting, who had just been sent flying, got up and walked towards us. His eyes were still strange and evil, but what was different from before was that he was holding a red talisman in his hand. My heart sank. Chun Yangting could still use a talisman at this moment. I had fought with him before. He was the master of the mysterious altar hall of the celestial master mansion. He was at least at the middle stage of the glorious memory realm, or even the late stage. Han Wennan and I had just advanced to the glorious memory realm, so we were at his match. I didn't know Monk Miao Ju's cultivation base, but I guessed that he wouldn't be able to defeat Chun Yangting. Chun Yangting's current appearance was most likely related to me tempting him to blow up the Terracotta Army. At that time, I had only thought of letting him handle the danger, but I hadn't expected that he was the strongest among us. It would be difficult for us to subdue him while he was in a state of confusion. What was more coincidental was that I hadn't brought the Yin-Yang Yama brush or other commonly used magic tools to conceal my identity. I only had the green hillock sword with me, which greatly reduced my power. Seeing Chun Yangting coming closer, I had no choice but to pull out the green hillock sword and stand side by side with Han Wennan. Chun Yangting wore a malicious smile on his face. His broken arm didn't seem to affect his movements. He raised his right arm, and the red talisman in his hand shot toward us. In the blink of an eye, an icy blade wrapped around us. I hurriedly poured my shaman energy into the green hillock sword to try to block it. However, Han Wennan was a step ahead. The leaf magic tool instantly swelled up, and with a fierce sweep, it forcefully swept away most of the icy cold blades. The remaining ones collided with the leaf magic tool, and with a clanging sound, they all disappeared. I heaved a sigh of relief and lifted my head to look. Chun Yangting had slowly lifted his foot and was about to step down. I felt my scalp tingle. I had seen this situation before. Last time, when Chun Yangting had used a walking star, he had activated the terrifying heavenly thunder talisman, which had almost killed me. I had relied on the golden light and pure yang god talismans, as well as my eyes to resist. I had barely escaped with my life. This time, was Chun Yangting going to use the heavenly thunder talisman again? Before I could think, Chun Yangting's foot had landed on the ground. He took out another talisman and threw it at us. I couldn't see the color of the talisman in the pitch-black cave, but since it was activated by the walking star, it could confirm my guess. It was possible that Han Wenin hadn't seen Qin Yangding's Heavenly Thunder Talisman before, but he could see that the talisman was guided by the Astral Step technique, so its power was definitely not ordinary. Thus, he became nervous. The leaf magic tool abruptly shrunk and folded in front of us. At the same time, a copper ball appeared in his hand. With a flick of his finger, it instantly flew into the air and spun around. It was unknown what it was for. The talisman that Chun Yangting had thrown out suddenly emitted a bright white light. Then, the edges of the talisman emitted black smoke. It looked as if it was about to burn. This was the sign that the talisman had been activated. I didn't have time to think. I poured all of my shaman energy into the azure hillock sword. At the same time, I silently recited the walking star technique and slightly lifted my left foot. The walking star technique recorded in the death scripture was called 9-star heavenly dipper. It corresponded to the Big Dipper and had 9 steps in total. At this moment, I could barely take the first step. I wasn't sure how powerful it would be or if I could block Qin Yangding's talisman. As the black smoke on the talisman became more and more intense, a terrifying aura slowly rose from within the cave. Right at this moment, a loud Buddhist chant came from behind Han Wenan and me. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.